Chapter 28. Late at night, the mayor's mansion was suddenly set ablaze, and cries and screams filled the air. Little Meng City was in chaos. Countless people who didn't know what was going on came out to see what was going on. But Wu Qi, who was waving his arms and legs, had already led the rest of the city guards and the 2,000 new recruits out to suppress the chaos, not allowing any people to leave their homes. He had perfectly maintained the order in the city. The chaos in the mayor's mansion lasted for 15 minutes, and then the huge gate of the mayor's mansion was opened, and countless dark figures dashed out from it. Although Yi Yan and his men had all been robbed by Wu Qi, the servants, and clan members they brought here still had quite a lot of money with them. Adding them together, it was still a considerable amount of money. Wu Qi had been spreading all kinds of rumors among the guards of the mayor's mansion. But Yi Yan and his brothers had already lost their minds, so none of them came out to refute the rumors, and none of them had sent their trusted men to supervise these hired guards. The rumors had made all 3,000 guards of the mayor's mansion have the same thought. That very night, over 2,000 guards suddenly went on a rampage. They set fire to Yi Yan's mayor's mansion, robbed all the belongings of Yi Yan and his brothers, and kidnapped a few hundred pretty serving ladies and servants from the mayor's mansion. After that, they broke into the mayor's mansion and snuck into Little Meng City. Little Meng City was a barren land, and there were no other cities within a few hundred miles. It was the most remote place in the Lu Kingdom. If not for the rare local produce from Meng Mountain, Little Meng City would be a place that even stray dogs wouldn't want to come to. Even so, those who could survive in Little Meng City were either businessmen who valued money more than their lives, barbarian hunters who lived on the edge of a knife, or criminals who had nowhere else to go. When Yi Yan and his brothers became officials in Little Meng City, they started hiring guards to defend the mayor's mansion for the sake of their own safety. The strongest group of people in Little Meng City were the rangers, barbarian hunters, and those brutal and aggressive villains. These people were a pack of wolves who wanted to eat meat. When you could feed them, they would risk their lives for Yi Yan. When Yi Yan couldn't feed them anymore, and might even drag them down with him, these guys started a riot without any hesitation. They robbed a bunch of money and girls, then sneaked into Little Meng City and lived a carefree life. Wu Qi commanded the city guards to roam around the city and suppress them. They only targeted the commoners and merchant caravans, and did not clash with the guards who betrayed their master. To be honest, these guards were not weak at all, and the soldiers under Wu Qi's command were no match for them. There was no need for them to fight against these guards, as Wu Qi did not have the heart to help Yi Yan's men. Leading a team of soldiers, Wu Qi stood guard on the street in front of the main entrance of City Lord Mansion. He could only watch helplessly as one guard after another, each carrying bags of different sizes and beautiful serving ladies on their shoulders, passed by quickly. The city guard manor was still ablaze, but no one went to put out the fire. Wu Qi vaguely heard the shrill screams of Yi Yan and the others, but how could their trusted followers have the time to care about them? They had no choice but to let them scream. In just a few days' time, Wu Qi felt that he was an amazing man, as he was able to turn the city guard manor into such a miserable state. The fire lasted for a whole night. After all, the walls of the mayor's mansion were built with green stones, and the only courtyard that was set ablaze was the inner courtyard of Yi Yan and his brothers. The fire had burned down all the flowers, trees, and buildings in the inner courtyard, and then gradually died down. A plume of black smoke rose up into the sky, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of smoke. Vaguely, weeping noises could be heard coming from everywhere. Yi Yan and his brothers' families were crying and wailing, talking about their money, their favorite concubines, and their favorite maids while weeping. After a night of chaos, over 2,000 guards of the mayor's mansion had escaped, and the remaining few hundred guards had joined Lu Qingfeng's side without any hesitation. In front of Yi Yan's men, they took off their mayor's mansion guard uniform, kneeled down in front of the general's office, and applied to join the general's office, becoming Lu Qingfeng's guards. Lu Qingfeng showed the generosity of a young master from an aristocratic family. With just an order, he changed these few hundred former guards into the uniform of the city guards, and allowed them to join the city guards and stay on duty in the general's office. These guards had cultivated their innate energy, and their strength was much stronger than ordinary soldiers. Although their loyalty was questionable, as long as they were given enough money, they could still use them. The men of Little Meng City were very honest. As long as they were paid, there was nothing to be picky about in their service. When Yi Yan heard the news, he walked out of the mayor's mansion, which was burned to the ground, and watched as the guards he recruited joined Lu Qingfeng's side. More than half of the guards had betrayed him and ran away, and the other half had abandoned him. This was like two heavy slaps on his face, making Yi Yan's eyes turn green, and his white muscles start to wobble. Especially when those guards had changed into the black uniform of the city guards, Yi Yan felt a sweet taste in his throat, and then he spat out another mouthful of blood, rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. Wu Qi kept both of his hands in his sleeves, smiling happily as he watched Yi Yan vomit blood and fall to the ground. With a weak voice, he yelled, "The mayor has vomited blood and fainted again. Someone, call a doctor, quick, quick." Throwing his hand forward, tens of bronze dagger coins fell beside Yi Yan, making a series of tinkling noises. Out of kindness, Wu Qi said to a few servants standing next to Yi Yan, whose faces were pale, as if their souls had flown up to the highest heaven, "I'm afraid you don't have enough money to hire a doctor." I still have some private money, can I lend it to you?" When Yi Yan heard the word, money, he immediately raised his head and yelled, "My money, my money, my money." Another mouthful of blood was spat out, and Yi Yan's throat made a few gurgling sounds, then he passed out. A few of Yi Yan's personal guards hurriedly helped Yi Yan up, pinched his philtrum, slapped his face, and sprayed cold water onto his face. Finally, they managed to wake him up. But when he woke up, Yi Yan's face was dark, and his eyes were dull. His white and tender skin was shriveled, as if he had lost tens of kilograms of water. Wu Qi squinted his eyes and looked at Yi Yan, then he glanced at those busy servants and guards in the mayor's mansion, and snorted. That night, Lu Qingfeng set up the grand white gold dagger formation outside his bedroom with a serious look. Using 3 array pillars to set up the array covered an area of 300 feet, and the entire courtyard he was in was enveloped by the power of the array. Wu Qi squatted beside him, curiously looking at Lu Qingfeng setting up the formation. Grand white gold dagger formation, Wu Qi knew about this formation. The scroll of stealing contained everything, especially the Tao of formation, which was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. In the world of cultivators, formations were similar to the alloy doors and electronic locks of vaults on Earth. They were often used to protect important abodes and all kinds of precious items, and they were also a manifestation of the Tao of nature. The scroll of stealing claimed that there was nothing in the world that could not be stolen. If one was not an expert in formations, how could he break the formation and steal all kinds of items? Therefore, a full 1/3 of the scroll of stealing was used to explain all kinds of magical theories of formations. Apart from all kinds of formations that were commonly seen in the world of cultivators, there were also the understanding and expansion of formations by the person who wrote the scroll of stealing. It was truly all-encompassing. In the scroll of stealing, all the formations under the heaven were like transparent air, without any difficulty. The grand white gold dagger formation was one of the basic formations of gold elemental formation. Even though Wu Qi had never studied the Tao of formation, he could still see through its secret with just one glance. The 3 pillars were set up in a triangular shape, and a faint gold elemental aura was flowing and rippling between the 3 pillars. A thin layer of white mist could be vaguely seen emerging from the ground in the yard. That was the grand white gold essence energy gathered by the formation. It took Lu Qingfeng a quarter of an hour to finally activate the formation. This simple formation had consumed all of Lu Qingfeng's innate energy. If not for Lao He bringing a bowl of human elixir to Lu Qingfeng in time, Lu Qingfeng would not even have the strength to stand. Looking at the formation that had been activated, Wu Qi cupped his chin with both of his hands, and asked curiously, "Is it worth the effort?" Lu Qingfeng took a deep breath, handed the bowl back to Lao He, and sat down on the stair next to Wu Qi. He looked up at the sky and said with an indifferent tone, "Someone will come." Before Yi Yan is officially stripped of his position and leaves Little Meng City, we have to be on guard like this every night. Looking at Lu Qingfeng curiously, Wu Qi said disapprovingly, but who is going to attack us? Before he could finish his words, the sound of water spraying came from outside the yard. Wu Qi's expression changed instantly. He couldn't be more familiar with this sound. It was the sound of his teacher, Wu Wang, slicing the neck of the sentry from behind with a dagger when he was patrolling the sentry. Blood spurted out from the arteries and arteries. Lu Qingfeng's body stiffened as well. He whispered, "Someone's coming. Lao He, go hide in the room." Lao He, with his hunched back, took out a pitch-black machete from nowhere, and stood next to Lu Qingfeng while trembling. He had no intention of entering the room. Wu Qi frowned, grabbed the machete from Lao He's hand, knocked him out with a finger, and threw him into Lu Qingfeng's bedroom. Nodding his head at Wu Qi with approval, Lu Qingfeng sneered and said, "Different from me, Yi Yan and the rest are after all the sons of Yi family. Even if they are the sons of a concubine, they must have an assassin following them since they were young." Wu Qi stared at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng slowly nodded his head and said, "Assassin, assassin's assassin." Wu Qi stood next to Lu Qingfeng, rubbing his hands and holding the lower-tier magical dagger in his left palm. Lightly waving the machete he grabbed from Lao He's hand, Wu Qi said with a cold voice, "So, the assassin following Yi Yan and the rest are here to cause us trouble?" That's right. So many troubles have happened in Little Meng City, and it seems we are the biggest suspect." Lu Qingfeng twitched his mouth. Not only were they the biggest suspect, but where did the pile of gold bricks under his bed come from? They were the real culprits. If not for his identity as the eldest son of the Lu family, perhaps the assassin following Yi Yan and the rest would have already come to him when Yi Yan and Yi Xing's personal belongings were stolen. Be careful. These assassins are not that easy to deal with. Lu Qingfeng took a deep breath, and took out a 6-feet-long flexible sword from his waist. He casually shook the flexible sword, and instantly, a glistening green light sprayed out a few feet away. "What a sharp weapon!" Wu Qi praised. Be it the material or the crafting method of this flexible sword, it was perfect among all the ordinary weapons. Suddenly, a black shadow flitted across the courtyard wall, and 4 black-clothed men appeared soundlessly in the courtyard. Chapter 29. On the ground of the courtyard, there was a layer of grand white gold energy, which was not noticeable. The night breeze was blowing across the roof, and the bells hanging on the eaves were ringing. Wu Qi's body was wriggling in a very strange way, like water ripples. From his toes to the top of his head, all the joints and bones in his body were vibrating at an indescribable frequency. From the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, all the strength in his body was being channeled into his body. He was like a tightly pressed spring, ready to unleash a deadly attack at any time. About 100 feet in front of them, 4 men in black were standing quietly in the shadow. It was so blurry that they could only see their silhouettes. There was no sound of breathing, no sound of heartbeat, and no human aura emanating from them. They were like 4 evil ghosts who had just escaped from the yellow spring, staring fixedly at Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng suddenly laughed and said, "Do you know that killing me is a provocation to the Lu family? The eldest son of the Lu family died in Little Meng City. Even if I am not liked by the people in the family, for the sake of the Lu family's reputation, they will definitely retaliate." An erratic voice came from the direction of the 4 men in black. Wu Qi couldn't tell which one of them was speaking. These assassins were obviously cultivating a different kind of skill. Everything was so strange that it made people shiver. "Killing you is the only way to get our master off the hook. The newly appointed general of Little Meng City has started a rebellion, looting the coffer and creating chaos in Little Meng City." Yi Yan, the mayor, was calm in the face of danger. He commanded the troops calmly and quickly put down the rebellion. "Although we have lost a lot of tributes from the coffer, we have done a meritorious deed." Lu Qingfeng spread his arms, turned his head and smiled at Wu Qi and said, Look, what did I tell you? What kind of suspect are we?" They were simply trying to silence him and frame him at the same time. But this is a ruthless and experienced way of doing things. I wonder who came up with this idea. The voice came again, it was young Master Yi Yan who came up with this idea. Pausing for a while, the voice shouted in a deep voice, "All right, cut the crap. If young master didn't want us to let you die, we wouldn't even say a word to you. Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi, you will die today." Before the voice died away, a black shadow suddenly moved, and a sharp whistling sound came from the air. Before Wu Qi could see the man's movement, he had already crossed 100 feet and was less than 30 feet away from Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. All of a sudden, the buzzing sound of a golden saber rang out in the air. Out of nowhere, a palm-sized, silk-like, crescent moon-shaped saber appeared less than 3 feet away from the black silhouette. In just a flash, the scimitar had reached the soft ribs of the black shadow. With a trace of extremely sharp cold chi, the scimitar spun rapidly, wanting to split open the black shadow's body and break into his body. In a flash, the blade had reached the soft ribs of the black shadow, with a trace of dark green color. Obviously, it was dipped in a deadly poison. The black shadow waved his hand, and the blade hit the crescent-shaped blade that was about to pierce into his body. The blade was dark and dull, and under the moonlight, a faint dark green hue could be seen. Obviously, it was dipped in poison. Along with a crisp sound, the snake-shaped dagger in the man's left hand was split in half. The dagger, which was condensed from the grand white gold essence power, spun rapidly and hacked into the man's body, breaking out from the right side of his ribs. Wu Qi heard the sound of the scimitar slicing the ribs and internal organs of the shadowy figure. When the scimitar flew out from the shadowy figure's body, a stream of blood mixed with minced meat shot out several feet away. Judging from the trajectory of the blade, the black shadow's heart should have been severely injured. But the black shadow didn't make any sound. He just leaped straight at Lu Qingfeng, and his right hand glowed with a faint green light, slashed towards Lu Qingfeng's neck. "Still not dead?" Lu Qingfeng cried out in horror. A green light sprinkled out, and the flexible sword in Lu Qingfeng's hand trembled and straightened, piercing straight out with a swishing sound. Clang! The flexible sword hit the black shadow's short blade. The blade broke, and the blade pierced straight into the black shadow's throat. Lu Qingfeng casually flicked his wrist and cut half of the black shadow's neck. Even though he was seriously injured, the black shadow still leaped at Lu Qingfeng like a mad tiger. His hands, one in front of the other, struck out with a muffled sound. One palm was aimed at Lu Qingfeng's throat, and the other was aimed at his heart. 3 more blades appeared in the grand white gold dagger formation. The blades spun rapidly, bringing with them a cold light, and pierced deep into the black shadow's back. One of the blades landed right on the black shadow's back. Accompanied by a frightening sound of bones breaking, the black shadow's spine was crushed by the blade. However, the black shadow didn't even let out a cry of pain. His eyes shone with a bone-piercing cold gleam, as he firmly thrust both palms towards Lu Qingfeng, one in front of the other in the back. When the palms were still a few feet away from Lu Qingfeng, a fierce wind had already hit Lu Qingfeng's face and made him feel a sharp pain. Lu Qingfeng stared blankly at the 2 palms coming right in front of him. He had never fought with anyone before, and his limbs were weak, and even his flexible sword had turned into a mere decoration. Wu Qi lifted Lu Qingfeng up with one palm and threw him behind him. He snorted coldly, and a large sheet of cold air burst out from both palms of Wu Qi. His innate water energy transformed into 2 whirlpools, about 1 foot in circumference, and rolled up layers of soft and fine airwaves in front of his palms. Bang! 2 muffled thuds rang out, as if 2 small hills had fallen into a deep pond. A tremor ran through Wu Qi's body. He felt that the palm force coming from the black shadow was like an endless bombardment from a heavy cannon. Even though he had cast the hand of web with both his hands at the same time, creating layers of whirlpools that kept cutting away the palm force coming from the black shadow, his body was still trembling violently, and all his internal organs were trembling violently. Oh! A wolf howl came out from the black shadow's mouth. His body suddenly expanded, and his palms became as big as a cattail leaf fan. A clump of pitch-black smoke came out from his palms, bringing with it a very pungent stench, as he forcefully slapped down towards Wu Qi. The 2 palm forces collided. The whirlpools in Wuqi's palms barely managed to erase 60% of the black shadow's force, before they shattered into pieces. After that, both palms collided with each other, a solid collision. A loud explosive sound rang out, and the black shadow's body suddenly exploded into countless pieces. Large pieces of flesh and blood, together with a pungent stench, splattered towards Wuqi and Lu Qingfeng. Wuqi's arms let out a sound that sounded like the waves of a rising river. His eyes suddenly widened, and he exerted all of his strength. The innate water energy kept rolling forward in the meridians of Wuqi's arms, like an endless stream of water. The remaining 40% of the black shadow's force from the last two palms shattered the 18 layers of hidden force in Wuqi's arms, and finally, the force dissipated. Wuqi shook his arms, and the innate water energy in his arms quickly spread throughout his body, transforming into a layer of water vapor that covered an area of a few feet in circumference, and burst out. The muffled sound of collision lingered on, and the hazy water vapor surrounded Wuqi and Lu Qingfeng. Countless pieces of flesh and blood collided with the water vapor with an ear-piercing whistling sound, but they could only penetrate about 1 foot deep before they were crushed into pieces by the water vapor. Wuqi let out a shrill howl towards the sky. His left hand quickly reached into his sleeve and grabbed a water spirit stone, madly extracting the energy from it to replenish his own consumption. The water vapor around his body suddenly converged inward, and the leaking spiritual energy flowed back into the meridians of both arms. Wuqi opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The strike unleashed by the shadowy figure before his death was too powerful. Even though Wuqi's innate water energy was good at using softness to overcome toughness, his lung meridians were still injured by the impact, and he couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, the innate water energy was good at nourishing everything in the world. With the replenishment of the energy from the spirit stone, wherever the spiritual energy passed through, the damaged meridians would quickly recover, and in just a few breaths, they would be as good as new. Taking a deep breath, Wuqi said in horror, "How could anyone risk his life like this?" His internal organs and spine were chopped into pieces by the machete condensed from the grand white gold essence qi, and half of his neck was cut by Lu Qingfeng with a sword. After that, he collided with Wuqi's palm for 2 times, and in the end, he even decided to sacrifice himself and self-destruct. Looking at the black blood all over the ground and the equally black broken bones and flesh, only God knew how much poison had been stored in this black shadow's body. If it were not for the fact that Wuqi's cultivation method was profound and his cultivation base was not weak, he and Lu Qingfeng could have been killed easily with just this one strike. Lu Qingfeng, who was still in a state of shock, said harshly, "They are the assassins. They have been cultivating their whole lives just for the last strike. Wuqi, you have to be careful." While shouting angrily, Lu Qingfeng formed a seal with his hands, and made a few hand signs in the direction of the 3 pillars, pushing the power of the grand white gold dagger formation to the maximum. Just now, Lu Qingfeng wanted to save some of the spirit stones used on the pillars, so the formation's power was only activated to less than 30%. In the end, that black shadow actually pounced right in front of the 2 of them, and still had the strength to fight to the death. Seeing with his own eyes how terrifying these assassins were, Lu Qingfeng did not care about being stingy with spirit stones, and hurriedly raised the formation's power to the maximum. In the shadowy corner of the courtyard, 3 black shadows stared at them. After a full quarter of an hour, the erratic voice from just now sounded again, "Formation. No wonder we felt uneasy after entering, and let 4th brother come out to test it. I didn't expect the eldest son of the Lu family to be a practitioner." Lu Qingfeng only laughed coldly. After the stimulation just now, he was now full of courage, and his heart was filled with the desire to fight. He raised his flexible sword, and infused his qi into the sword, making it as straight as an arrow, and constantly emitting a weng sound. "Ever since I was born, I don't know how many people have wanted to kill me. Ha! Let's see if you guys have that luck today." A strand of indescribable strange resentment spread out from Lu Qingfeng's body. Wuqi looked at Lu Qingfeng in surprise, and slowly nodded his head. Just one assassin had forced the 2 of them into a panic, and now there were still 3 assassins, eyeing them like tigers watching their prey. If Lu Qingfeng did not bring out the courage to fight for his life, Wu Qi really did not have the confidence to protect him. Seeing the performance of the assassin just now, Wu Qi began to doubt the power of the Grand White Gold Dagger formation. Of course, the full version of the Grand White Gold Dagger formation should be very powerful, but Wu Qi did not have confidence in Lu Qingfeng, this half-baked formation master. While his mind was wandering, the three assassins in the shadows leaped up at the same time, like three poisonous snakes. Wu Qi clearly saw that when the three assassins jumped up, they each stuffed a blood-colored pill into their mouth, and then the power in their body suddenly increased by more than 10 times. That must be a poisonous pill that could stimulate the body's potential. With the sudden increase in power by 10 times, the three assassins were ready to fight for their lives. 10 times the power, even Wu Qi, who had strengthened his meridians twice, did not dare to rashly take on such a sudden increase in power, let alone these ordinary assassins. The three black shadows almost teleported into the Grand White Gold Dagger formation. With a chi-chi sound, more than 300 scimitars formed, and the faint Grand White Gold essence chi on the ground disappeared without a trace, all condensed into these 300 scimitars. Countless sounds of air breaking could be heard, and the scimitars were like birds flying into the forest, all chopping towards the three black shadows. At this moment, the power of the Grand White Gold Dagger formation had skyrocketed, and it was more than 100 times stronger than the 3 or 4 scimitars from before. Before Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng could make a move, the three assassins, who had taken the pills and had their power increased by 10 times, were chopped into pieces. Hundreds of scimitars flew in the air for a while, and then slowly dissipated. Wu Qi stared blankly at the pieces of flesh floating in the air, and now he had a straightforward understanding of the power of the formation. He suddenly had an idea: he should collect some materials that could be used to set up the formation, and like Lu Qingfeng, he should start from the basics. In order to become a qualified thief, he had just started his journey of 1,000 miles. The 3 pillars of the formation emitted a slight cracking sound, and the spirit stones embedded in the pillars had exhausted all their spiritual energy, breaking into fine grains of sand. Sighing, Lu Qingfeng hurriedly ran over, and put the 3 pillars into the bag hanging on his waist. What a waste, what a waste! These spirit stones are not easy to find. Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng, who had a pained expression on his face, and coughed loudly. Young master, I want to know more about the assassins. They are too scary. Chapter 30. The bright red sun shone upon the green mountain peak. A muddy road meandered through the front of the mountain, and there were very few people on the road. Wu Qi, who was clad in a standard armor and had a custom-made green-edged sword hanging on his waist, was riding on the back of a single-horned deer. He had his arms crossed in front of his chest, looking down at the main road at the foot of the mountain. The single-horned deer was chewing the moss on a rock out of boredom, grinding its teeth and making a loud noise. Maybe the moss didn't suit the deer's taste, it snorted unhappily and swung its long tail, slapping Doggy's face. Doggy rubbed his nose. He, who was also wearing the standard armor of Little Meng City's city guards, let out a silly smile, pushed away the tail of the deer with his palm, and proudly stroked the 12-feet-long axe lying next to him. The surface of the axe had a circumference of 3 feet, just like a small door. Even without swinging it, one could tell that it was a very powerful weapon. 1 month ago, after the assassination at night, Yi Yan and his brothers had completely stopped their activities. They were hysterically drinking and having fun in the mayor's mansion, fooling around with the maids and servants, as if they were going to spend all their money in just a few days. Within this 1 month, Zhang, who had brought back all the soldiers of the 3rd Heavenly Battalion from Meng Village, and the battalion commander of the 3rd Heavenly Battalion, Hu Wei, had decided to join Lu Qingfeng's side after being recruited by Lu Qingfeng. He had become Lu Qingfeng's 3rd right-hand man, and the 500 elite soldiers of the 3rd Heavenly Battalion had become Lu Qingfeng's personal guards. Zhang, who had also brought back 600 strong young men from Meng Village, including Doggy. All of them were brave men who could fight and fight. With the 4,000 soldiers from Meng City, and the huge amount of money and food sent by Wu Qi, Meng Village didn't need so many young men to protect it. So, the elders of Meng village had wisely sent 600 of their strongest men to Little Meng city. If he stayed in Meng village for the rest of his life, he would just be a country bumpkin. If he went to Little Meng city and became Lu Qingfeng's trusted aide, he might have a bright future. The elders of Meng village were very accurate, and their bets were very accurate as well. The 600 strong men of Meng village were immediately recruited into Lu Qingfeng's personal army. Furthermore, Lu Qingfeng even took out an internal cultivation technique from the Lu family, the mighty bull strength, and gave it to the villagers of Meng village. 1 month later, the Lu kingdom's decision on how to deal with Yi Yan and his men had arrived at Little Meng city. Taking bribes, bending the law, dereliction of duty, dozens of crimes were pinned on Yi Yan and his men. Yi Yan was stripped of his position as the mayor, and Lu Qingfeng became the acting mayor of Little Meng city. Everything was going according to Wu Qi's plan. However, regarding the punishment of Yi Yan and his men, Wu Qi was surprised by the attitude of the Lu kingdom. Yi Yan and his men didn't receive any further punishment, they were just asked to return to the Yi family and reflect on their mistakes behind closed doors. Obviously, the Yi family had done their part. They had used their connections to reduce the punishment of Yi Yan and his men. In the end, other than losing their positions, they didn't receive any other punishment. If you don't kill the snake, you will suffer the consequences. Yi Yan and his men have to die. Wu Qi was sitting on the back of a single-horned deer, squinting his eyes and looking in the direction of Little Meng city. This place was about 300 miles away from Little Meng city, and it was the only road leading into and out of Little Meng city. If Yi Yan and his men wanted to return to the Yi family, they had to go through this road. Doggy smiled and touched a big axe. He patted on Wu Qi's arm and asked with a smile, "Big brother, when will the people you want to kill arrive?" Wu Qi thought for a while and thought for a while, then he slowly nodded his head and said, "About an hour?" They have a lot of carriages, and they have so many women to carry. This road is not easy to travel. If you want to come here, it will take some time. Patting on Doggy's shoulder, Wu Qi frowned and said, "Doggy, didn't Big Brother Zhang Hu say that only adults can come here when he went to Meng village? Why are you following me?" Doggy stopped smiling and said with a deep voice, "My father is dead, I have to take care of my mother and a younger brother and sister. If I come to Little Meng city, the acting mayor will give me a high salary, and I can also cultivate the mighty bull strength given to me by mayor. This is much stronger than the skills passed down in the Meng village. Why shouldn't I come?" Holding the big axe tightly, Doggy raised his head up proudly. He looked at the white clouds floating in the sky and said with a smile, "All the uncles in the village say that the women from the outside world are better than the ones in the village. I want to earn a lot of money, then I can buy a few women from the outside world and bring them back to the village. I want to have babies, lots and lots of babies." Wu Qi's face turned stiff. Doggy's ambition reminded him of Lu Xiaobai. There was a time when Lu Xiaobai stood outside a famous red light district in Holland, raised her head up and shouted, "Give me women, I want lots of women." Shaking his head and sighing, Wu Qi said helplessly, "Doggy's name is too ugly, why don't I give you a big name? What do you think of Meng Xiaobai?" Doggy nodded his head, he couldn't tell if a name was good or bad, so he said without hesitation, "Meng Xiaobai? Sounds good, from now on I'm Meng Xiaobai." Then, he turned his head and said cheerfully to the group of burly men behind him, "Uncles, from now on, I'm Meng Xiaobai. This is the name that Big Brother Wu Qi gave me." The men from Meng village had formed dozens of circles and were drinking wine while laughing. When they heard Meng Xiaobai's words, they all raised their wine bags and cheered. In their excitement, these men drank all the wine in the big wine bags. Their faces and necks turned red, and the veins on their necks bulged up to the size of a thumb. These tough men were like a group of mad bulls, as long as Wu Qi gave the order, they would rush out and tear everything in front of them apart. The secret skill of Liang Lu family, mighty bull strength, was really suitable for these tough and stubborn men from Meng village. In just a short period of 20 days of cultivation, this group of men had the unique vigor of a bull that had seen a red cloth. The 500 elites of the 3rd Battalion led by Hu Wei were standing quietly in the woods nearby. They were as quiet as a mountain, none of them moved, and none of them made any sound. Even their mounts, the swift galloping mounts, stood there quietly, occasionally swinging their tails to chase away the bugs around them. Compared to these men from Meng village, they were like boiling lava, and the 3rd Battalion was like a silent iceberg, but they both had terrifying destructive power. Slowly, a large group of coaches and mounts appeared on the road from afar. There were more than 100 coaches and over 300 guards on their mounts, guarding the two sides of the road. Yi Yan's convoy had arrived. In this convoy, besides the relatives, servants, and guards of Yi Yan and his men, there was also the messenger from the capital of Lu Kingdom, and a group of over 100 Yi family members. These Yi family members from Moyang Yi family had come to Little Meng City to escort Yi Yan and his men back to their family. I wonder if there are any assassins among these people. Wu Qi looked at the convoy and waved his hand lightly. A man from Meng village hurriedly ran into the woods and whistled in a weird tone. The whistling sound came from the woods far away, and it traveled all the way to a narrow valley next to the road. When Yi Yan's convoy arrived in front of the valley, a weird whistling sound was heard, and countless sharp needles were shooting toward Yi Yan's convoy. Along with the weird roars, over 2,000 barbarians were jumping happily, holding all kinds of weapons in their hands, and dashing toward the convoy. Behind these barbarians, hundreds of barbarians with strong bows in their hands were constantly shooting arrows, shooting poisonous prickles into the sky. The reason why the people from Meng village could stay in the depths of Meng mountains was because of the hatred between them and the barbarians. However, there were still a few barbarians who had a secret relationship with them. Many rare and precious items were harvested by these barbarians in the depths of Meng mountains and traded with the people from Meng village. Therefore, through these barbarians who had a secret relationship with Meng village, they could lure a group of real barbarians to set up an ambush by the roadside, and ambush a convoy that was said to be filled with salt, food, and beautiful women. It was a piece of cake. Under Wu Qi's arrangement, these nearly 3,000 barbarians didn't suspect that they were working for Wu Qi, and they just excitedly set up an ambush in the valley. When they heard the signal, they immediately dashed out and started attacking Yi Yan's convoy crazily. Unfortunately for those guards of Yi family, the needles came like a storm, and nearly half of them were hit by the needles before they could even see who the enemies were. Wu Qi had seen the power of these needles in Meng village. Once it pierced into a human body, it would immediately make the human body shrivel up, and the blood would turn into poisonous blood and spray out from the body. Miserable cries kept coming out, and the guards of Yi family kept falling to the ground. Facing the barbarians who were charging at them crazily, the reaction of the guards was obviously slower. These guards were Yi Yan's trusted guards from his family, and their actual combat ability wasn't that strong. Yi Yan's biggest reliance in Little Meng City was those guards who had betrayed him. Those warriors who lived in Little Meng City were the ones who had actual combat experience and a powerful force. The barbarians swarmed forward and quickly surrounded Yi Yan's convoy. Countless blades and axes were swinging and hacking, killing all the guards of Yi Yan's family. A few carriages were forcefully pulled to the roadside by the barbarians, and the curtains on the doors were pulled down. The cries of girls could be heard coming out from the carriages, and this further stimulated the barbarians to attack even harder. Luckily, the Yi family had sent nearly 100 guards to protect Yi Yan. These guards were the elites of the Yi family. No matter it was their equipment, cultivation level, or morale, they were far better than Yi Yan's loyal guards. Nearly 100 armored guards surrounded the four brothers, Yi Yan, Yi De, Yi Xing and Yi Tuan, forming a circular formation and slowly retreating to the side of the road. There was a pile of rocks in the direction they were retreating to. With the strength of these guards, if they could form a formation to protect themselves, they would be able to hold off the barbarians. But something that made Yi Yan and his men despair finally happened. Suddenly, 3 barbarian leaders rushed out of the valley, each holding a bone flute, a bone staff, and a bone blade. They released a chilly wind and let out shrill ghost howls. Then, they took out a 6 feet long, grayish blade light and hacked it down towards Ji Hao and his companions. The bone flute's devilish sound could shatter the soul, the bone wand could suck out the marrow, and the bone blade beam was aimed at the neck. In just a blink of an eye, 17 elite guards of the E family had fallen. All of them were beheaded by the blade beam, and their blood and flesh were sucked dry by the chilly wind and devilish sound. A gloomy sneer suddenly came from one of the carriages, and 4 faint shadows shot out from the carriages. Wu Qi nodded his head. The Yi family had indeed sent out a new assassin to help Yi Yan and his men. Slowly raising his hand, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Everyone get ready, let's kill everyone down there." The men of Meng village jumped onto their single-horned deer, and the soldiers of the 3rd Heavenly Battalion jumped onto their mounts. Under Wu Qi's lead, everyone slowly descended the mountain, and quietly approached the battlefield. Chapter 31. Assassin. They were the men of sacrifice from the wealthy families of Great Yan Dynasty. They would select talented orphans and train them with cruel methods since they were young. They would use all kinds of drugs and all kinds of unimaginable training methods, together with some unique evil techniques, and turn them into killing machines. Each assassin was loyal to their master, and they would sacrifice everything for their master at any time. When the 4 assassins who rushed to Yi Yan's side from Yi Jessen showed themselves, they immediately swallowed a pill that could increase their strength by 10 times. Their bodies expanded quickly, and they looked like 4 dark clouds. Together with a strange ghostly howl, they leaped towards the 3 barbarian leaders. On a hill not far away, Wu Qi kept watching them. He could tell that although these 4 assassins had a strong cultivation base, when facing the barbarian leaders who were controlling 3 lower-tier magical items, if they didn't fight with all their strength, they would be killed easily. Just like 1 month ago, when the 4 assassins were torn into pieces by the grand white gold dagger array in Lu Qingfeng's courtyard. Their strength had increased by 10 times, and their flying speed had increased by at least 3 times. The 3 barbarian leaders were caught unprepared. The white blade beam rolled up into the sky and chopped off the calf of one assassin. Blood splashed everywhere. Amidst the shrill howl of the barbarian leader, the blade beam quickly retracted and chased after the 4 assassins. However, the 4 assassins, including the one who had his calf chopped off, were all screaming desperately. They ignored the threat of the blade beam and kept flying forward. A chilly wind rolled up from the ground. The bodies of the 4 assassins trembled, and their flying speed was reduced by 30%. An ear-piercing devilish howl was heard. The assassin who had his calf chopped off, and blood kept gushing out from his mouth. His body trembled, and then his head exploded. The chilly wind rushed up and sucked his body into a dried corpse. All the barbarians around them started shouting and yelling crazily. They turned their heads and looked at their leader. The blade beam flashed again. The barbarian leader who was controlling the blade spat out a mouthful of blood and activated the blade beam. It doubled the speed of the blade beam, and it fiercely hacked onto the body of another assassin. Blood sprayed out from the wound. The assassin was chopped off from his waist. He let out a miserable howl and fell to the ground, dead on the spot. The other 2 assassins had arrived in front of the barbarian leader. They didn't say a single word. Their bodies expanded rapidly before exploding violently. Blood and flesh splashed in all directions, and dark blood sprayed out hundreds of feet away. The 3 barbarian leaders were blown into pieces, and their arms and legs were sent flying hundreds of feet away. The barbarians and E family guards within 1,000 feet radius were hit by the black blood. The black blood quickly corroded their bodies, causing chunks of flesh to fall off their bodies. These people only let out a few miserable howls and twitched on the ground for a while before their bodies turned black and they died. Wu Qi's face twitched as he watched. What kind of evil martial arts did these assassins cultivate? They hurt both themselves and others, evil and tyrannical to the extreme. Shaking his head, he hurriedly led his subordinates down the mountain and gradually arrived at the side of the main road. With the death of the 4 assassins, the strongest force around Yi Yan was gone. With the protection of dozens of elite guards, Yi Yan and his men screamed and retreated towards the rocks on the side of the road. Witnessing their leader's death, the barbarians were enraged as well. They killed all the others in the caravan in no time, howling and roaring as they surrounded Yi Yan and his men. More than 1,000 barbarians besieged dozens of elite guards. Even if these guards were equipped with high-quality armors, and each of them had inner force that was above the realm of 30 years, they still couldn't block the endless attacks that came like a tidal wave. In just 10 minutes, when they were about 100 feet away from the rocks, Yi Yan and his men had lost half of their guards. Once the barbarians were enraged, they pounced forward without any regard for their own lives. They used their flesh and blood to block the Yi family guards' weapons and forcefully dragged them off their mounts. Once a Yi family's guard fell to the ground, dozens of barbarians would immediately rush over and throw heavy axes at the guards, smashing them into pieces and killing them on the spot. Yi Yan's body was trembling, his flesh was writhing around him. He wailed, "Oh my heavens! What sin have I, Yi Yan, committed? Why are these barbarians beating me? Oh my God, Ho Tu, please save me." One of the barbarians threw out a hand axe. The hand axe was made from black iron and looked rough, the blade was not sharp. However, the barbarian was extremely strong. The axe swung across the air with a muffled whistling sound and landed on Yi Yan's left shoulder. A shrill howl rose into the sky. Yi Yan's left arm was chopped off, blood gushing out from it. Yi Xing, Yi De and Yi Tuan cried out in shock. They quickly hid behind Yi Yan. With Yi Yan's huge body, he was indeed the best human shield. What brotherly love and friendship! At this moment, Yi Xing and the other two had long forgotten about it. Yi Yan's body was shaking violently, he roared at the guards like a madman, "You useless things! If you can't kill all these barbarians, what's the point of keeping you? What's the point? Let me go back to the family, I'll sell all your wives and children as mine slaves." Yi Yan's curses had triggered the guards' madness. Chi-Chi leaped up from the ground, crazily activating their inner energies. Suddenly, the weapons in their hands shot out 3 feet long green swords, swinging towards the barbarians with an ear-piercing whistling sound. The green swords were invincible. Wherever they went, weapons, spears and armors were all broken. The guards quickly swung their swords, and wherever they went, barbarians' heads rolled on the ground. Their arms and legs were broken, and blood sprayed all over the ground. The inner force of a 30-year realm cultivator could only last for 2 breaths. In just a short span of 2 breaths, a dozen Yi family guards had killed more than 100 barbarians. Their inner energies were quickly depleted, and they were surrounded by the barbarians. They were about to die. "Take the blood battle pill, and I will treat your family well." The leader of the Yi family guards suddenly shouted in a deep voice. The Yi family guards, who had depleted their inner energies, roared in unison, then took out a blood-colored pill and put it into their mouths. Their bodies expanded like the 4 spikes, and a huge amount of energy burst out from their bodies. They raised their weapons and shot out 6 feet long green energy beams. Wherever the sword energy passed, everything was crushed into pieces. A dozen Yi family guards laughed and charged forward. In just a blink of an eye, over 300 barbarians had died under their swords. After that, blood gushed out from the 7 apertures of these guards, and their bodies exploded. The leader of the Yi family guards coldly looked at his dead subordinates, then waved his hand at the other 10 guards and said, "Take the blood battle pill now." "Yes." The 10 Yi family guards clenched their teeth, looked at the barbarians around them, and took out their blood battle pills and put them into their mouths. Another series of suicidal attacks. More than 200 barbarians were killed by these Yi family guards who had risked their lives to kill them. In just a blink of an eye, almost half of the 1,000 barbarians were killed. The blood on the ground was mixed with the mud, and turned into a thick layer of mud. The barbarians' morale suddenly weakened. Even the most savage barbarian had a limit of fear. Looking at their dead companions, and the remaining 20 Yi family guards, the courage of the remaining barbarians plummeted. The barbarians looked at each other in panic, then let out a loud cry, turned around and fled into the surrounding forest. Yi Yan covered the wound on his left shoulder with his right hand, laughed ferociously, and said, "Go after them, kill them all. These damn bastards, not only did they hurt me, they also killed the angel who gave the order. This is a big disaster, we must kill them all." Someone had to take the blame for the angel's death. Among all the people here, Yi Yan, who was missing an arm, was the best candidate to take the blame. Without an arm, he was a useless man. The Yi family would never look at him again. Throwing him out to be the scapegoat was the best choice. Thinking of his miserable future, Yi Yan clenched his teeth and made up his mind to order his guards to kill as many barbarians as possible. The leader of the Yi family guards, Yi Qi's eyes were filled with a thick blood-red light. He did not do his job well, and the person he was protecting had an arm chopped off. Even if he could return safely, his position in the family would definitely be shaken. It's all these damn barbarians' fault. It's all these damn barbarians' fault. Yi Qi ripped off his helmet and threw it on the ground. He roared angrily and left a few guards to protect Yi Yan and the others, while he raised his sword and chased after the scattered barbarians. He raised his true qi, and a dark blue and watery sword aura suddenly shot out from the tip of the sword, shooting 6 feet away. Yi Qi had reached the peak of the Hotian realm. He could maintain the 6 feet sword light for 7 minutes, which was more than enough for him to kill over 100 barbarians. Wu Qi looked at the water-colored sword light on Yi Qi's sword and smiled proudly. Since it was a water elemental skill, the Jin Qi produced by it would naturally be water elemental. Furthermore, it was an ice elemental skill, which was rare among the water elemental skills. The Jin Qi of an ice elemental skill was restrained, and its purity was much higher than ordinary water elemental skills. Furthermore, it was a peak Hotian realm warrior. With a long whistle, Wu Qi rode on his single-horned deer and dashed out from the woods. Behind him, 600 men from Meng village and 500 elite soldiers from the 3rd Battalion, Qi, dashed out. The sound of hooves thundered out, scaring the fleeing barbarians and Yi Yan and the others, making their faces turn pale. The men from Meng village dashed out like a wildfire, slaughtering the scattered barbarians in groups of 3 to 5. The barbarians, who had lost their will to fight, had their heads rolling on the ground, scaring the rest of the barbarians back to where Yi Yan and his men were. The 500 soldiers of the 3rd Battalion, who wore black helmets and black armors, were like a silent iceberg, coldly and mercilessly marching forward in an orderly formation. A huge mountain was dashing forward, crushing everything it touched into pieces. It didn't matter if it was the fleeing barbarians, or the Yi family guards who were chasing after them, they were all smashed into pieces by this huge mountain. Yi Yan screamed out in pain, "Help, Yi Qi, help!" Yi Qi, who had just beheaded over 30 barbarians, quickly turned his head back. He suddenly realized his mistake. He had abandoned the person he was supposed to protect and ran so far away. With a loud shout, Yi Qi, who was in a panic, turned his mount around and dashed towards Yi Yan. Wu Qi had already blended into the crowd of Meng village and approached Yi Qi. As soon as Yi Qi backed off, Wu Qi immediately injected a large amount of his inner energy into the lower-rank magical dagger and threw it out like a hidden weapon. With a loud whistling sound, the dagger shot out and pierced through Yi Qi's body, who was standing a few feet away with his back facing Wu Qi. The lower-rank magical dagger was extremely sharp, it had instantly killed all of Yi Qi's life force. Only the internal energy in his body was still surging rapidly due to the inertia. Wu Qi dashed forward and slapped on Yi Qi's dantian. A huge amount of water elemental internal energy was sucked into Wu Qi's palm, quickly turning into a part of his innate water energy. In just 2 seconds, Wu Qi had sucked all of Yi Qi's energy, then with a flip of his body, he kicked him far away. Wu Qi let out a long laugh. Without saying anything, he dashed forward like a fish and arrived in front of Yi Yan and his men. "In your next life, don't make things difficult for me." Like a blade, Wu Qi lightly swept across the necks of Yi Yan and his brothers. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and 4 heads flew up into the sky. Chapter 32. On the drill ground of Little Meng City, a parasol was blocking out the scorching sun. Wu Qi was lying on a bamboo couch with his limbs spread out. On his left hand was a plate of braised wild boar's ear, and in his right hand was an exquisite red copper wine pot. He was humming a tune and drinking wine in a carefree manner. A thin layer of water vapor was hovering around Wu Qi's body, preventing the heat from entering, and the dust from getting close to his body. Even on such a hot day, Wu Qi could still feel the coolness around him. It was the greatest enjoyment in the world. On the drill ground next to him, dust was flying everywhere. Thousands of city guards were being ruthlessly trained by Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and the rest of the men. Zhang Hu and the other barbarian hunters were teaching these city guards the techniques of individual combat, while Hu Wei and the elites of the 3rd Battalion were training these rookies in various battle formations. Both of them complemented each other perfectly, and soon, these city guards had the shadow of a real soldier. In the forest outside the city, another 20,000 new recruits were undergoing even crueler and barbaric training. The training program was a conclusion Wu Qi came up with. It was based on the training program of the special forces of a few powerful military countries on Earth, and the requirements of each index were increased by 10 to 20 times. Because of the natural energies, the people here had extremely strong bodies. No matter how hard they were trained, they would never die. Those soldiers who could pass the initial training program in the woods would have the right to join the drill ground of Little Meng City, where they would be trained crazily by Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and the rest of the men. They would then be considered as rookies in the city guards. Lu Qingfeng had successfully obtained the position of acting mayor, and Wu Qi had naturally taken over the position of acting officer. Since he had become the acting officer, of course, Wu Qi had to show some of his capabilities. With the insane amount of knowledge he had fused with Lu Xiaobai, it was a piece of cake for him to come up with a new military law for the new recruit training camp. The source of soldiers here was excellent. With a little training, they would become qualified soldiers. On top of that, Lu Qingfeng had also brought a set of basic martial arts from his family, the army breaker killing art, which was suitable for fighting and killing on the battlefield, and passed it on to the soldiers of the city guards. In just a few months, these soldiers had completely changed and looked a little more like elites. Close to 30,000 elite soldiers, this force was enough to make Lu Qingfeng's weight become heavy. Therefore, for the past few days, Lu Qingfeng had been beaming with joy. He had devoted himself to all the affairs of Little Meng City, handling everything personally, trying his best to make Little Meng City stronger and more prosperous. This was Lu Qingfeng's first property. How could he not be attentive? 3 months ago, the former mayor of Little Meng City, Yi Yan, and his men were killed by the barbarians. This incident was like a ripple of water that disappeared quickly, and even the Yi family didn't pursue it. Yi Yan was not the first mayor of Little Meng City who was killed by barbarians, and he would not be the last. Every 3 to 5 years, a batch of officials would be killed in Little Meng City. The people of Lu Kingdom had gotten used to this kind of news. Therefore, now, Wu Qi could lie quietly on the drill ground, as if he was watching a monkey show, enjoying Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and the rest of the men training those unlucky city guards. In Wu Qi's eyes, those tired soldiers with green eyes were so pleasing to the eyes. Turning other people's pain into your own happiness, Xiaobai's life experience is really insightful. Crossing one leg over the other, Wu Qi suddenly grabbed a stick and smashed it at Meng Xiaobai. Xiaobai, how dare you slack off? Be careful, or I'll break your legs. Quick, move, move. Whoever dares to slack off, I'll give you a big stick. Meng Xiaobai, who was wearing a specially made training uniform and carrying 200 kilograms of iron on his back, let out a miserable howl. He rubbed his buttocks, which were stinging from being hit by sticks, clenched his teeth and followed the few elite soldiers of the 3rd Battalion in front of him, trying their best to change their formations. Every time they changed their formation, they would stab, block, or hack with the heavy spear in their hands, and they would coordinate with their partners to attack or defend. Above their heads was the scorching sun, and around them was the boiling dust. The training equipment on their bodies and hands added up to more than 400 pounds. Tough, extremely tough, but no matter it was Meng Xiaobai or the other villagers, they were clenching their teeth and holding on. The mighty bull's strength was crazily circulating in their bodies, constantly replenishing their energy. The mighty bull's strength was a skill that forced one to torture oneself. Just like a hard-working old bull, the best way to cultivate the mighty bull's strength was to overload one's body with a large amount of exercise, squeezing out all the energy in one's body, allowing one's body to break through its own limit and stimulate the strongest potential in one's body. The vigor of the reckless bull was not a very high-level cultivation technique, but the people who practiced the vigor of the reckless bull would eventually become powerful warriors with extremely strong stamina, strength, and vitality. Wu Qi and Meng Xiaobai had made it very clear that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. If these villagers wanted to stand out under Lu Qingfeng and have a rich future, they had to work hard, and work harder. If not, why would Lu Qingfeng give you villagers such a generous salary? Why would he give you power and wealth? If you want to get it, you have to work hard. Under Wu Qi's training, the 600 men of Meng village were like 600 wild bulls, crazily training themselves. Even Meng Xiaobai, who had not fully grown his body and was still a little immature, although he could not keep up with the frightening training, under the supervision of Wu Qi, he still clenched his teeth and persisted. In just 3 months, Meng Xiaobai's strength had become a whole new level compared to before. Finally, the sound of drumming could be heard, and all the soldiers on the drill ground stopped training under Chi-Chi's command and started breathing heavily. It was lunchtime. The heavy training had made all the soldiers feel hungry, and the green light in their eyes had become brighter. A soldier in the kitchen pushed a cart into the drill ground with a smile on his face. Good meat, good wine, good white rice, except for the medicinal wine, which could only be consumed by half a liter each to stimulate their blood and restore their energy, there was enough food. As long as they could eat as much as they wanted. All the soldiers on the drill ground, Chi-Chi swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and the sound of his saliva being swallowed was loud and clear. Wu Qi laughed out loud. He grabbed the last few pieces of wild boar's ears and stuffed them into his mouth, then he drank all the wine in the pot, clapped his hands, and walked towards the gate of the drill ground. Brothers, eat and drink as much as you can. 2 hours after lunch, continue your training. Sai, I'm different, I'm going to Green Mountain Restaurant to eat and drink. But why can't you go there? If you can defeat Zhang Hu and become the personal guards of the mayor's mansion, then you can be like me. Wu Qi walked out of the drill ground while laughing. Thousands of soldiers stared at Wu Qi with green eyes, and once again, they swallowed hard. They turned their heads at the same time, and stared at the barbarian hunters and elite city guards under Zhang Hu and Hu Wei's command. These soldiers knew that it was impossible to defeat Zhang Hu and Hu Wei. But it seemed that there was still hope for them to defeat their subordinates. Jumping out of the city guards and becoming the personal guards of the mayor's mansion had become the biggest wish of these soldiers, and it stimulated them to train every day with their lives on the line. They had no choice, with Wu Qi purposely provoking and tempting these soldiers every day, they had no choice but to fall into his trap. Walking out of the drill ground while laughing, Wu Qi clapped his hands, took the reins handed to him by a personal guard, and jumped onto the back of the single-horned deer. Although the speed of this kind of deer was not as fast as the fast horses of the city guards, it could travel through the mountains, and it was much better than the fast horses in the woods. Besides, it had a beautiful shape, and the color of its fur was very beautiful. Wu Qi had always liked single-horned deer. Patting on the horn of the deer, driving it slowly toward the direction of the Green Mountain Restaurant, Wu Qi asked with an indifferent tone, "Did anything happen in the city these few days?" When young master was inspecting the taxes, what was the reaction of those peddlers and merchants? Following behind Wu Qi were 4 personal guards, all of them were elite warriors selected from the guards of the mayor's mansion, and all of them had a cultivation level of at least 40 years. After listening to Wu Qi's question, Zhao Qinzue, who had the highest cultivation level and was the most experienced among all the personal guards, said, "Some of them tried to evade taxes by bribing, just like what the former mayor had done. They were severely punished by young master, and even confiscated half of their properties. They are so greedy." Wu Qi scratched his head, "They have earned so much money in Little Meng City, and they still want to evade taxes? Do they really think our young master is like that damn fatty? Send someone to keep an eye on those big peddlers and merchants. If they dare to do anything, report back to me immediately." Wu Qi had a proud smile on his face. Those peddlers and merchants had been his targets for a long time, and he had been hoping to find some treasures suitable for cultivators in their storage rooms. However, Wu Qi felt it was a little inappropriate to attack them for no reason. He really hoped that they could do something to give him an excuse to empty their storage rooms in the middle of the night. Zhao Qinzue answered, raised his horsewhip and chased away a few stray dogs that were running around on the street. The bustling little Meng city had a strange color to it. The streets were filled with trading caravans, and the sounds of humans and beasts mixed together. At all times, there was a huge amount of goods being shipped out of Little Meng City to the Lu Kingdom and even the Great Yan Dynasty. At the same time, there would be a huge amount of goods being shipped back to Little Meng City. The streets were crowded with people. But, when they saw Wu Qi approaching on the back of the deer, all the passers-by immediately stepped aside and bowed to Wu Qi. Who in Little Meng City didn't know who Wu Qi was? He was the chief right-hand man of the acting mayor, and he held the power of the general officer. He had a group of ferocious soldiers under his command, and within the 500 miles radius of Little Meng City, the strongest armed force was under his control. With a background like this, who dared to be disrespectful to Wu Qi? Wu Qi wasn't arrogant at all. No matter who was bowing to him, he would always return the greeting with a smile on his face. The unique bright smile on Wu Qi's face made everyone feel like a spring breeze was blowing on their face. They all felt that Wu Qi was too approachable and kind. While greeting the people on the street, Wu Qi and company came to the best restaurant in Little Meng City, Green Mountain Restaurant. For the past few months, Wu Qi had become a regular customer of Green Mountain Restaurant. The waiter of the restaurant hurriedly came up to them and took the ride from Wu Qi and company. Patting on the waiter's shoulder, Wu Qi threw a small piece of silver to him and said with a big smile, "Take good care of it." The waiter quickly caught the silver and said with a big smile on his face, "Don't worry, no one dares to be careless with the ride of His Excellency." Wu Qi nodded his head and brought Zhao Qinzue and company into the restaurant. They found a table on the third floor of the highest floor, near the street. Leaning against the window, Wu Qi stared at the bustling crowd downstairs and started humming a tune. Little Meng City was his first foothold since he came to this world. He needed the resources of Little Meng City to build a good foundation for himself. He had the obligation to maintain the prosperity and stability of this place. After all, for the past 3 months, with the power of general officer, Wu Qi had collected dozens of energy stones. Except for a portion given to Lu Qingfeng, the rest were used by Wu Qi for his own cultivation. During these 3 months, all his meridians had been strengthened 9 times by the innate water energy. Wu Qi could break through to the Xiantian level at any time. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi looked up at the sky and said with a low voice, "Green Mountain Restaurant? Hee, Mount Qingcheng, I'll be back." Suddenly, a loud noise came from the street. Some people were running, some people were screaming, and some animals were neighing in a panic. Wu Qi quickly poked his head out and saw a group of fierce-looking guards holding whips made of steel wires in their hands, crazily lashing at the pedestrians, pack animals, and many other things on the street. They were running towards him at top speed. Behind this group of guards, there was an old man wearing a red robe, with a weird expression on his face, shouting with a sharp voice, "The Marquis is here, who dares to stop us? Kill them all." Wu Qi was furious. Marquis? What the hell? Chapter 33. In front of a shop on the side of the road, 2 kids with braids were playing in front of the shop. All of a sudden, the street was thrown into chaos. The 2 kids were pushed to the ground and were dragged a few steps away. If the crowd didn't calm down, the 2 kids would be trampled to death. Wu Qi lifted the front of his robe and leaped down from the sky. He pushed away a few men who were running around in panic and grabbed the 2 kids who were still in a daze. He strode to the shop where the 2 kids were playing and handed them over to a middle-aged woman who was crying inside the shop. After that, Wu Qi turned around and stood in the middle of the street. Swish! A steel wire whip, as thick as a goose egg, lashed down on his head. Judging by the way the man wielding the whip looked like he was really going to kill Wu Qi. Not to mention a human head, even a rock would be smashed into pieces by this specially made whip. Wu Qi raised his hand and caught the long whip. The long whip was filled with a strong force, and a sharp energy was about to tear apart Wu Qi's palm. However, layers of swirling airflow emerged from Wu Qi's palm and forcefully turned the force on the whip into nothingness. Wu Qi held the whip tightly in his hand. Then, with a backhand gesture, a powerful whirlpool burst out. The fierce-looking man on the back of the mount felt as if his body was being sucked by a huge whirlpool, and he could not control his own body as he was pulled forward. He flew for 20 to 30 feet in the air and fell heavily in front of Wu Qi. Wu Qi stomped down hard on the man's crotch, flattening that piece of meat like a puddle of mud. The man let out a miserable howl, threw away the handle of the long whip, held his crotch with both hands and rolled on the ground. The guards who were smugly whipping the passers-by behind them stopped and looked over in anger. The old man in the red robe was so angry that his body was trembling. He quickly rode up to Wu Qi, pointed his finger at Wu Qi's nose and scolded furiously, "Where did this lowly bastard come from? You, how dare you hurt the people serving the marquis? You, what's your name? Where was he born? Who else is in your family? Capture them all and behead them." Wu Qi rolled his eyes. He grabbed the burly man on the ground and threw him at the old man in red. Followed by a muffled bang, the burly man landed squarely on the old man's body. Both Chi-Chi and the old man let out a miserable howl as they were thrown over 30 feet away. The burly man's body was thick and sturdy, so he was able to withstand the force, but the old man's body was frail and weak, not much different from an ordinary person. He choked on his breath and didn't recover for a long time. If it weren't for a few guards hurriedly jumping off their horses to give the old man a massage, the old man would have suffocated to death. Kill my entire family. Oh, my family members are all dead. If you want to kill them, you'll have to go to the netherworld. Wu Qi chuckled as he looked at the old man who was gradually recovering his breath. He was overjoyed. This old man wanted to kill Wu Qi's family. Wu Qi didn't mind sending this old man to the netherworld to find his parents. The old man's face darkened due to anger. He pointed his trembling finger at Wu Qi and spat out a few mouthfuls of phlegm. After he had regained his breath, he immediately shouted, "You bunch of trash, why did you bring him here? Kill this bastard, kill this bastard." Zhao Qinzue and 4 personal guards jumped down from the restaurant as well. Hearing the old man's roar, Zhao Qinzue let out a loud laugh and said, "Fuck." In Little Meng City, shouting that you want to kill the general, you old fool, are you the daughter of your mother and a wild boar? How could you be so stupid? He casually threw a whistling arrow into the sky. The 3-inch-long arrow shot up 200 feet high into the sky, producing a sharp whistling sound that made people's eardrums hurt. Soon, the sound of footsteps could be heard coming from the surrounding streets. The pedestrians on the street quickly hid in the shops along the street. Large groups of city guards swarmed over and surrounded the street. On the surrounding streets, groups of archers appeared, pulling their bows and aiming at the old man and his men. Dozens of burly men, who were rubbing their fists and preparing to attack Wu Qi, were stunned for a moment, then they quickly retreated to the side of the old man. A captain of the city guards rushed out from the group of soldiers, kneeled down on one of his knees, and shouted at Wu Qi, "Your Excellency, a group of men who were guarding the north gate have been defeated. All their limbs were broken and thrown beside the gate. It was done by these sons of bitches. Their limbs, tendons, and bones were all broken by this whip." Wu Qi glanced at the steel wire whip on the ground, then he waved his hand and signaled the captain to step aside. Taking a few steps forward, Wu Qi stared at the old man and sneered, "Did you guys hurt the city guards who were guarding the north gate?" The old man sneered, and when he was about to say something, an impatient scolding came from behind the few groups of city guards behind him, "Old dog, you're getting more and more useless. Why are you taking so long to clear the road? Why are there so many idiots blocking the road here? Behind the street, a group of men and horses were slowly approaching. There were about 600 valiant soldiers in full armor and battle robes that were all crimson, surrounding a few carriages. The curtain of the first coach was pulled open by someone, revealing half of his face, staring angrily at the city guards who were blocking the street. Only half of his face was exposed, and it was as fair as jade, looking very handsome. But the watery peach blossom eyes on his face were filled with an evil aura that made people feel uncomfortable. Through the opened curtain, Wuqi found that this man was naked, and behind him, there were two white bodies slowly twisting and turning on his back. This guy was doing that in the coach. Wuqi stared at Yi Yen fiercely, sneered and said, "Who are you? Why are you doing whatever you want in Little Meng City?" With a sneer, the man actually pulled open the curtain and walked out from the coach. He was originally naked, but he had tied a piece of white cloth around his waist to cover his lower body. The white cloth was stained with fresh blood, and it made people think of something else. He reached out his hand and grabbed a beautiful naked girl, who looked to be about 12 or 13 years old. In front of so many people on the street, the man opened his mouth and kissed and bit the girl's chest. After that, he raised his head and sneered at Wuqi, "Doing whatever I want? Bah! Who do you think you are? I've traveled all over the Lu Kingdom, and who dares to say that I'm doing whatever I want?" The girl was twisting in the man's arms, using her body to rub against the man's sensitive parts. Wuqi looked at the man and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Some people seemed to be born to be the kind of people who lived like princes and were high above the masses. This man was at most 30 years old, and he was 8 feet tall. His body was perfect like a statue, and his face was extraordinarily handsome. Except for a pair of peach blossom eyes, which slightly ruined his overall look, there was nothing about him that could be criticized. He reached out his hand and grabbed the girl's crotch, then he glanced at Wuqi from the corner of his eyes and said with a cold voice, "You're the general of Little Meng City? No wonder you can mobilize the city guards. Those idiots guarding the north gate, are they your subordinates? Why do they want to collect the so-called entrance tax? What a bunch of blind dogs. I'll just break their limbs as a punishment, do you have a problem with that?" Wuqi took a deep breath and said with a cold voice, "Who are you?" The man lowered his head and kissed the girl's red lips, then he said proudly, "I'm Lu Suifeng, the son of the Lord of Puyang. I've heard that the people of Little Meng City are pretty nice, so I'm here to have some fun." He grabbed the girl's neck and threw her into the coach. Lu Suifeng licked the rouge on his palm and laughed with a weird voice, "You're just a general of Little Meng City, why don't you make way for me? Do you want to die?" Lu Suifeng didn't know when, but a 4 feet and 2 inches long sword appeared in his hand, and he casually swung it in front of him. With a strange whistling sound, an invisible wind shot out from the sword. 2 city guards who were standing in front of Lu Suifeng's coach screamed in pain, the spears in their hands were broken by the wind. The sword didn't slow down at all. It heavily chopped on the bodies of the 2 soldiers, tearing their armors apart and leaving inch-deep wounds on their chests. Blood sprayed everywhere, the 2 city guards staggered back a few steps and fell to the ground. A cold light flashed in Wuqi's eyes, he shouted, "Zhao Qinzue, save them." Zhao Qinzue hurriedly brought a few of his personal guards who were also rangers, took out some gold wound medicine and wrapped up the wounds of these 2 soldiers. The gold wound medicine of rangers was very effective, even better than the gold wound medicine of the Lu Kingdom. That's why Wuqi asked Zhao Qinzue to save them. The old man in red suddenly shouted with a sharp voice, "Marquis, it's this guy who didn't want to make way for you. I was clearing the path in front of you, but he came in and blocked our way. This guy is disrespectful, he deserves to die, he deserves to die. He should be cut into 1,000 pieces." Lu Suifeng's face turned cold, he pointed his finger at Wuqi, sneered, and said, "Did you hear that? Kill yourself, don't bring trouble to your family." Wuqi squinted his eyes and let out a bright smile. He shook his head, smiled and said, "I really want to see how I'm going to bring trouble to my family." After staring at Wuqi for a while, Lu Suifeng suddenly let out a harsh laugh and said, "You're dead meat. Your whole family is dead meat. I've made up my mind, I'm going to kill all the men in your family, but all the women have to let me have some fun. Waving his sword, Lu Suifeng shouted, Someone, capture him, torture him, find out where he was born. If he has parents, bring them all here. If he doesn't have parents, bring all his neighbors here. Kill all the men, as for the women, choose the cute ones, I'm going to fuck them to death. Those cavalries, who were wearing red battle robes and armors, responded to Lu Suifeng's order and started riding on the street, charging forward. Raising their 18-feet-long spears, these cavalrymen charged toward the city guards of Little Meng City in an aggressive manner. The corner of Wu Qi's mouth twitched. This Lu Suifeng, how could he be so brutal? Lawless, truly lawless to the extreme. Don't tell me, Wu Qi is afraid of you, Lu Suifeng. Raising his hand, Wu Qi shouted, the barbarians have attacked Little Meng City, Marquis Lu Suifeng and his men were all killed. Someone, release the arrows, kill these sons of bitches. Hearing this, the city guards' archers on the roof pulled their bows and shot at those cavalries in red armor. Chapter 34. All of you, stop. From the end of the street came Lu Qingfeng's shout. Then, dozens of scimitars condensed from grand white gold essence chi whistled through the air, cutting the rain of arrows in half. The horses of dozens of blood-armored cavalrymen who were charging at the forefront also had their forelegs cut off, and fell to the ground with their mounts in a sorry state. Fortunately, these cavalrymen didn't have the time to increase their speed. When the tens of cavalrymen in the front fell to the ground, the cavalrymen in the back hurriedly pulled the reins and stopped their mounts from charging. The dozens of curved blades flew back and forth in the air for a few times, and finally disintegrated with a shrill noise. Lu Qingfeng's face was pale, his forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his internal energy was almost depleted. In a flurry, he shoved 3 formation pillars into the storage bag tied around his waist, and at the same time, he led a large group of personal guards and ran towards Wu Qi. Lu Qingfeng rolled his eyes, looked at Wu Qi in the crowd, and murmured in a low voice, You, how dare you attack us in front of so many people? Can't you find a quiet place to do it? Lu Suifeng stared blankly at the archers on the rooftops on both sides of the street. Trembling, he raised his long sword, pointed it at Wu Qi, and roared, You lowly peasant, how dare you give the order to shoot arrows? You are dead. You, how dare you attack me? You are definitely dead. Wu Qi picked his ear with his little finger, shook his head disdainfully, and said, A dog that bites doesn't bark. How many times have you said that you want to kill my whole family? Smiling mockingly at Lu Suifeng, Wu Qi said brazenly, If my young master didn't stop me, I would have killed all of you on the street. Lu Suifeng's body was trembling, and he drew a circle around the people in the shops on both sides of the street with his long sword. He said angrily, How dare you attack a marquis in front of so many people? You lowly peasant, how dare you? Wu Qi threw a glance at the people on both sides of the street, and suddenly laughed out loud, Pa! So what if I kill you in front of them? Are you afraid of your family's revenge? If your father, Lord Puyang, dares to send people to take revenge on me, I will kill them all. Slapping hard on the shoulder of a city guard standing next to him, Wu Qi snapped, Remember this, Little Meng City is Master Wu Qi's territory. Lu Suifeng shut his mouth. He stared blankly at Wu Qi, his heart at a loss. When had he ever seen such a ferocious person like Wu Qi? Among the over 100 vassal kingdoms of Great Yan dynasty, nobles like princes, dukes, and marquises stood high above the masses. Which commoner dared to be rude to a marquis? Wu Qi was just a small general of Little Meng City, and he really dared to kill a marquis on the street. Touching his neck, Lu Suifeng felt a little guilty and did not dare to look at Wu Qi. Instead, he glared angrily at Lu Qingfeng, who was walking through the crowd. Lu Qingfeng. These are your subordinates. Do you know that he almost killed me just now? If even a strand of my hair was hurt, you. With a stern face, Lu Qingfeng walked over and nodded his head at Wu Qi. Wu Qi let out a laugh, stared at Lu Suifeng and said, "Why didn't Marquis Yi say that if I hurt even a strand of your hair, you will kill all my young master's family members to vent your anger?" Lu Suifeng shut his mouth. Lu Qingfeng rolled his eyes and stared at Wu Qi again. Kill all Lu Qingfeng's family members? Even the king of the Lu kingdom wouldn't dare to say something like this, let alone Lu Suifeng. Although he was the son of Lord Puyang was just a relative of the Lu kingdom. In terms of power, the Lu family's position in the Lu kingdom's imperial court was far more powerful than Lord Puyang. Wu Qi's casual words made Lu Suifeng choke on his breath, and he nearly fainted from anger. He stared at Wu Qi angrily, and the sword in his hand was trembling. He wished he could just give the order to kill Wu Qi first. Just when Lu Suifeng was fuming with anger, a calm voice suddenly came from the coach behind him. "Marquis Lu, are we in Little Meng City?" Why are the city guards of Little Meng City blocking our way? Could it be that Little Meng City's army is not strict enough, and the city guards have become bandits? Following the voice, a tall young man came out from the coach. With a slight step, he flew over Lu Suifeng's coach like a feather and landed next to Lu Suifeng. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. It seemed this young man's cultivation level was higher than his own, and he had 1 foot in the Xiantian realm. However, after injecting the innate water energy into his eyes, Wu Qi found that this young man's energy was floating, and he couldn't control it when he was circulating it. If he wasn't wrong, this young man's cultivation level must have been achieved with the help of external objects, like pills, or some kind of natural herbs. This young man's facial features were similar to Lu Qingfeng's, but he had a gloomy expression. His eyebrows were always frowning, and his eyes were filled with an evil light. His eyes were wandering around, and his vision was a little messy. Just by looking at his eyes, Lu Suifeng knew he wasn't a kind man. Standing in the coach and looking down at Lu Qingfeng, this young man said coldly, "Elder brother, what kind of general are you? Look at you, don't you know the rules? According to the law of the Lu kingdom, when a marquis is out, the people should stay away. Instead, you sent your soldiers to stop Marquis Lu's coach. What are you trying to do?" The moment they met, one accusation after another was thrown at him. The anger in Wu Qi's heart once again rose. Lu Qingfeng, who had some understanding of Wu Qi's character, took a step forward and stood in front of Wu Qi, who was about to lose his temper. With a straight face, Lu Qingfeng said calmly, "Sixth brother is here. Why didn't you tell elder brother earlier?" Lu Qingfeng's sixth brother, the son of Lu Qingfeng's second uncle, Lu Ziyuan sneered, placed his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Marquis Lu has recently been appointed as the military supervisory officer of 8 provinces. He's in charge of supervising the military affairs of 8 provinces. Little Meng City is under the jurisdiction of the Three Mountains province, so it's within the jurisdiction of the Marquis." Staring at Lu Qingfeng coldly, Lu Ziyuan said coldly, "It's time for me to take up an official position, so I asked my father to help me get the position of military supervisory officer. That's why I came to Little Meng City to visit you, elder brother." Lu Suifeng threw his head back and laughed out loud, then he squeezed into the coach and rummaged for a while. Finally, he found an official document and a silver plate, then he threw them to Lu Qingfeng proudly. Lu Qingfeng took over the document and the silver plate and had a quick look. It indeed stated that Lu Suifeng was now the military supervisory officer of 8 provinces, in charge of supervising all military affairs within 8 provinces. Lu Qingfeng's face darkened. Wu Qi quickly walked up to him and asked what this military supervisory officer was. Lu Qingfeng explained in a low voice, then Wu Qi's face darkened. He murmured, "If I knew this would happen, I would have killed them just now. After all, there are countless barbarians around Little Meng City. No matter how many people died, I can just blame it on these barbarians. They won't have any problem with that." The so-called supervisory officer wasn't a permanent position. However, in the Lu Kingdom, if there was a need to train their children, they would specially set up such a position. It could be to supervise military affairs, government affairs, water conservancy, agriculture, commerce, etc. They could also set up such a position. A few sons of influential families would travel around the country, either supervising military affairs or government affairs. After doing this many times, they would be familiar with this kind of work. The power of a supervisory officer wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. They had the right to report directly to the Lu Kingdom, and their reports would be sent directly to the Lu Kingdom's monarch and the most powerful courtiers. These official documents had the power to decide the life and death of the lowest-level officials of the Lu Kingdom. If they really picked out a few bones in the egg and framed him with a few crimes that were neither light nor heavy, then this official's future would be gone. Besides, these supervisory officers were all from influential families. Their families had a strong background, and when they were traveling around, they could do whatever they wanted, which was a headache for anyone. Once someone offended them, they would be suppressed by the family behind them. Even the governor of a county would be in a difficult situation. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan stared at Lu Qingfeng and burst out laughing. While laughing, Lu Ziyuan said proudly, "Elder brother, can you please arrange a place for us to stay? Also, seal all the official documents and files in the general's office. Seal all the money, provisions, and weapons. Before we do a full review of all the military affairs in Little Meng City, no one is allowed to move a single soldier." Wu Qi hid his hands in his sleeves and took a few steps back. He tilted his head and stared at Lu Ziyuan, trying to figure out how much the clothes he was wearing were worth. At the same time, he also calculated the value of Lu Suifeng's coach. He swore in his mind that if he didn't strip off the underwear of these two guys, he wouldn't be the underhand sex disciple. Lu Qingfeng clenched his teeth and looked at the arrogant Lu Suifeng, then at Lu Ziyuan, who was nodding at him. With a gloomy face, he waved his hand and said, "All soldiers, return to the barracks. No one is allowed to leave the barracks without my order. Marquis Lu, sixth brother, follow me." With loud footsteps, the city guards slowly retreated from the street. Wu Qi grabbed Zhao Qinzue and whispered a few words to him. Zhao Qinzue quickly blended into the crowd and left. He wanted to go to the new recruit training camp in the woods so that he could increase the patrols and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. Secretly expanding the army by 20,000 soldiers, secretly training another 20,000 soldiers. If this was found out by Lu Ziyuan, then Wu Qi would have no choice but to put the blame on the barbarians once again. Sighing lightly, Wu Qi mumbled to himself, "If I can save myself some trouble, I'll try my best to save myself some trouble. Before I'm strong enough, I really shouldn't provoke these bastards." Suddenly, a gaze that made Wu Qi's blood run cold swept across from Lu Ziyuan's coach. It quickly swept across Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi's body stiffened, and his scalp went numb. He didn't dare to look in that direction. Instead, he quickly shifted his gaze to Lu Qingfeng. Lu Ziyuan jumped off the coach, grabbed Lu Qingfeng's hand intimately and said, "Ha ha ha, big brother, long time no see. Sixth brother missed you so much." After giving Lu Qingfeng a tight hug, Lu Ziyuan whispered into his ear, "Big brother, second brother asked me to bring you a message. This time, I'm going to play you to death. Do you know why that fat bastard Yi Yan is making things difficult for you? It's all arranged by second brother, understand?" After letting go of Lu Qingfeng, Lu Ziyuan laughed out loud again and said, "Big brother, I'm so happy to be able to meet you today." Wu Qi kept shaking his head. How could this be considered as a brother? Chapter 35. Inside the mayor's mansion, the lights were shining brightly. Outside the main hall of the general's mansion, pretty maids were walking back and forth, serving wine and delicacies to the guests like a flowing river. The sound of bells could be heard, and a large group of dancers were dancing in the middle of the hall. Their long hair and colorful ribbons were fluttering in the air, making them look like some evil girls. At first, Wu Qi thought that Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan had only brought 600 guards and some personal servants with them, but he never expected that behind them, there was another team of carriages carrying dozens of maids, over 20 dancers, and all kinds of fine wine and luxurious clothes. Escorting this team of carriages were 400 elite cavalries. both of them had brought a total of 1,000 guards to Little Meng City. Whether it was equipment or cultivation level, these 1,000 cavalries were much stronger than the city guards of Little Meng City. The charge of 1,000 cavalries was more than enough to defeat the 8,000 city guards of Little Meng City. Even if they incorporated Zhang Hu and the other barbarian hunters, as well as those rangers recruited by Lu Qingfeng, into the army, they still wouldn't be a match for this cavalry. Taking Lu Suifeng as an example, there were dozens of right-hand men, who were eating and drinking, and their clothes were covered with grease and wine. All of them had the cultivation level of peak Hotian. They were constantly emitting a terrifying aura, suppressing Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, who were standing beside Lu Qingfeng. Indeed a marquis, even the right-hand men around him are not ordinary. Wu Qi glanced at the smoky main hall, frowned and shook his head. The inner courtyard of the mayor's mansion had been burned down. Now, the only mansion left in the mayor's mansion was the general's office. Recently, Lu Qingfeng was busy raising funds to repair the outer wall of Little Meng City, so he didn't have the intention to rebuild the mayor's mansion. Therefore, when Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan entered the mayor's mansion, they immediately occupied the general's office and forcefully took it as their living quarters. To make matters worse, Lu Suifeng held a grand banquet on the same night, and sent out invitations to all the most powerful businessmen in Little Meng City, saying that it was a welcoming dinner for him. Lu Suifeng, Lu Ziyuan, and their personal guards had occupied the northern side of the hall, and they were having fun. On the west side of the hall, there were nearly 100 uneasy merchant representatives. They were either lowering their heads in silence, staring blankly into space with their wine glasses in their hands, or whispering to the people around them. They had no idea why this domineering and unscrupulous Marquis Lu had summoned them here. On the east side of the hall, Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng, Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and a few other men were sitting behind a long narrow table, silently watching the dancers dancing crazily in the middle of the hall. A small set of bronze bells was placed behind them, and several musicians were playing a fast-paced tune. The chimes were very annoying. Wu Qi scratched his head. He did not know if there was something wrong with Lu Suifeng's head. He actually brought the chimes with him when he came out. The weird atmosphere of the banquet lasted for a quarter of an hour. After eating and drinking, Lu Suifeng burped and threw down his wine glass. With a clang, the dancer, Chi-Chi, stopped dancing, gave Lu Suifeng a charming smile, then turned around and retreated to the back of the lobby. All the musicians bowed deeply to Lu Suifeng, then followed the dancers and retreated to the back of the lobby. Placing both of his hands on the table covered with wine, Lu Suifeng gazed at the hundreds of merchant representatives with a stern expression. Under his gaze, the merchants all lowered their heads to show their respect. These merchants were the local tyrants of Little Meng City, nothing could escape their eyes. They had all heard about the commotion Lu Suifeng had caused when he entered the city, and they knew he was not a man to be messed with. Not only did he act like a tyrant, he even crippled dozens of city guards at the city gate. Even the acting mayor, Lu Qingfeng, could not do anything to them, and had to obediently invite them into the mayor's mansion. Although these merchants came from wealthy families, they dared not offend these noblemen. Coughing, Lu Suifeng let out a laugh and said, "Guys, I've come from afar, and it's been a tough journey, just to supervise the military affairs of Little Meng City and protect your safety. You should show me some appreciation. I know very well what the specialty of Little Meng City is. Here's a list, on it are some worthless things. Take a look. If you don't have any problems, just gather all these things and bring them to me, then you'll have nothing to do with me." Waving his hand, the old man in red, who was standing behind Lu Suifeng, let out a weird laugh and swaggered over. He took out a thick scroll from his sleeve and threw it on a merchant's table. The old man in red said with a cold voice, "I'm Lu Zhong, the steward of the marquis. When you've gathered all the things on the list, just come and find me." Abruptly, Lu Zhong reached out his hand and grabbed the nose of the merchant in front of him, then brutally tore a big hole on his nose. The merchant screamed out in pain, while Lu Zhong laughed out loud. "In 3 days, if you can't gather all the things on the list, I can guarantee that all of your families will be ruined. I know you have some backing, or else you wouldn't be able to do such a big business in Little Meng City. But you have to find out who the Lord of Puyang is. Lu Zhong slapped the screaming merchant's face and shouted in a stern voice, "Get the hell out of here, all of you. If you can't gather all the things in 3 days, all of you will die." The slap was so powerful that the merchant was sent flying, and his head hit the door of the lobby. His head was bleeding. None of the merchants dared to say anything. One of them picked up the scroll thrown out by Lu Zhong, bowed to Lu Suifeng, then turned around and walked out of the lobby. These merchants were loyal. They helped the merchant who had fainted after being slapped by Lu Zhong, then left the mayor's mansion together. Wu Qi kept shaking his head. He could guess what was written on the scroll even with his knees. "Those who steal the hook will be killed, those who steal the country will be marquis." The biggest thieves in the world, they were all men with high positions. This Lu Suifeng was obviously extorting and blackmailing them. What else could these people, who were being blackmailed, say? What else could they say? Throwing away the wine cup in his hand, Wu Qi crossed his arms in front of his chest and stared coldly at Lu Zhong, who had his head held high. Lu Qingfeng placed both of his hands on the table, staring at Lu Ziyuan with a pair of watery eyes. All the right-hand men behind Lu Suifeng had also put down their wine cups and chopsticks, looking at Zhang Hu and Hu Wei with evil intentions. The eerie silence lasted for a full quarter of an hour before Lu Suifeng suddenly said in a slow voice, "Lu Zihai is my best friend. We have been through life and death together, and we can even share our concubines and maids. 8 months ago, he fought with you, Lu Qingfeng, and you intentionally broke his left arm." Lu Qingfeng said in an indifferent tone, "So, he sent assassins to chop off my left arm?" Lu Ziyuan smiled and said, "It wasn't second brother who sent the assassins, it was me. Elder brother, you and second brother have the same mother, so second brother wouldn't dare to do that. It was me who was angry, so I sent a group of assassins from my grandfather's family. I just wanted to chop off elder brother's left arm, and then I would let this matter go." Let this matter go. Lu Ziyuan said it casually, but every word he said made Wu Qi's heart tremble. This was a rich and powerful family, this was a young master from a rich and powerful family. Was this still a brother? This was more of an enemy than an enemy. Lu Qingfeng stared at Lu Ziyuan coldly, sneered and said, "So, you came here personally, just to make trouble for me?" Lu Ziyuan laughed and said, "Of course. It wasn't easy to train these 50 assassins from my grandfather's family, and it cost me a lot of money. None of them returned home, and the orphans and widows still have to be taken care of by my grandfather's family. If I don't vent my anger on you, I won't be able to sleep peacefully. I must make you bleed." Sighing, Lu Qingfeng said in a cold tone, "Sixth brother, are you really going to lose your last bit of face?" Lu Ziyuan stared at Lu Qingfeng coldly and said with a strange smile, "Of course. This is not Liang, so no matter what I do, no one will know. If that's the case, why should I give you face?" Lu Suifeng sneered and added, "If Madame Liang could take care of you a little, we brothers wouldn't have pushed you too far. But, since Madame Liang doesn't care about you, don't blame us for being too cruel." Wu Qi sighed silently. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan's words were arrogant, and their behavior was domineering. Were all the young masters from the influential families in this world like them, or was it because Wu Qi's character was not good enough to meet these two men? Standing up, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, "Young masters, our young master has been forced to Little Meng City, and I can foresee that his future is not going to be bright. Why do you have to push us to this point? Don't tell me you want to drive our young master out of the Lu kingdom." Lu Ziyuan clapped his hands and laughed out loud. He pointed his finger at Lu Qingfeng and said, "Good, well said. Lu Qingfeng, if you break your left arm and live in seclusion in Meng Mountain, we won't force you anymore. Meng Mountain covers an area of a few thousand miles, and there are countless rare treasures there. With that, you can live a carefree life for the rest of your life." Live in seclusion in Meng Mountain. Lu Qingfeng's face darkened. There were countless rare treasures in Meng Mountain, but there were also countless barbarians living there. The Lu kingdom had been established for hundreds of years, and the Great Yan dynasty had been established for over 2,000 years. Those who dared to go deep into Meng Mountain had all disappeared without a trace. Living in seclusion in Meng Mountain, how could Lu Ziyuan say that? Lu Suifeng grabbed a plate of steamed fish and threw it at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng moved his body to one side and dodged the plate. The plate flew far away and smashed into pieces on the ground. Lu Suifeng sneered and said, "It's decided. Either you break your left arm and live in seclusion in Meng Mountain, or we'll ruin your future and play with you for the rest of your life." Hee hee. Wu Qi let out a few cold laughs. Then, he pulled Lu Qingfeng up with one hand and dragged him out of the hall. Such a bold move startled both Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan. Lu Suifeng pointed his finger at Wu Qi's back and shouted angrily, "Wu Qi, after Lu Qingfeng is done for, you'll die too." Wu Qi turned his head and waved his hand, "If you have the guts, kill me now. Or, gather your men and kill our young master as well. Do you have the guts to do that?" Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan stared at Wu Qi with gloomy faces. Along with a cracking sound, the cushion they were sitting on was torn into pieces by an invisible force. "In 3 days, let this Wu Qi die by accident." Lu Ziyuan snorted coldly. Chapter 36. Late at night, Lu Qingfeng's backyard. Steam was rising from the bathroom, and the spacious green stone bathtub was filled with hot water. Wu Qi was lying lazily on a green stone bench in the bathtub, and 2 serving girls were wiping his body with a silk towel. It was as if all the tiredness in his body had been squeezed out by the serving girls, and Wu Qi felt so comfortable that he almost dozed off. Lu Qingfeng was sitting on one side of the bathtub, soaking in hot water from his neck down. His face was red, and sweat was rolling down his face. 2 serving ladies were standing around him, feeding him mouthful after mouthful of cold rice wine with a white jade wine cup. Breathing out a long breath, Lu Qingfeng narrowed his eyes and stared at Wu Qi, then said, "I have the ability to protect myself, and they won't dare to do anything to me. After all, my mother is the current leader of the Lu family, so they can only frame me. Even if they send assassins, they won't do it when they are still in Little Meng City." After drinking another cup of rice wine, Lu Qingfeng frowned and said, "But you've offended Marquis Lu too much, I'm afraid they will make you their target." Wu Qi snorted disapprovingly, then said with an indifferent tone, "I'll deal with whatever comes my way. If they want to make me their target, they should be prepared to be killed by me. If they die in Little Meng City, will it be a big problem?" Lu Qingfeng's eyebrows twitched, and he scolded with a low voice, "Don't do anything stupid. Marquis Lu and Lu Ziyuan have powerful men around them. I can only protect myself, and if I really want to make a move on them, I'll have to mobilize all the city guards. Although we've recruited 20,000 new soldiers, we don't have enough weapons and armors, and they are not loyal enough to me. I need to recruit them carefully before I can use them." After pondering for a while, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "I'm still not strong enough. I need to find a way to make a fortune, not only in Little Meng City, but also in other places to recruit those refugees and rangers, and recruit them into the city guards." Lu Qingfeng didn't say anything. Was it so easy to get a windfall? As for recruiting more recruits, Lu Qingfeng felt the same way. However, Little Meng City only had a floating population of over 200,000, and the 20,000 new soldiers had almost taken away all the useful people from this floating population. If he wanted to recruit new soldiers, he would have to go to another city to think of a way. Lu Qingfeng reached out his hand and caressed the waist and butt of the servant girl next to him, then pointed at the 2 servant girls next to Wu Qi and said with a smile, "They are a gift to you." Turning his head back to look at the 2 maids who were massaging his body, Wu Qi shook his head. "I'm not of legal age yet. It's too early for me to worry about this. Back then, my master had told me that I couldn't get close to women until I was of age. Otherwise, I'd lose my true yang and it would be detrimental to my cultivation in the future. Standing up, Wu Qi grabbed a green robe lying beside the bathtub, gazed at Lu Qingfeng from the corner of his eyes, let out a weird laugh and said, "Young master, tonight you will be a dragon and 4 phoenixes, enjoy yourself. Turn the pressure into motivation, you have to work hard tonight." Laughing out loud, dodging the white jade wine cup thrown at him by Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi put on the robe and walked out of the bathtub. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were going to attack him. Wu Qi sneered. He had to find a way to make them die in an accident outside Little Meng City. Wu Qi walked into the empty courtyard and gave the surroundings a glance. With a blink of his body, he hid himself in a shadowy corner of the courtyard. The misty water vapor slowly spread out. His body was twisting and turning fainter in the midst of the water vapor, then he slowly merged with it. He nimbly leaped over the wall and headed towards the courtyard where Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were staying, as if he was very familiar with it. Along the way, all the guards of the mayor's mansion had been driven away by Lu Suifeng's personal guards. The only ones patrolling the place were the personal guards of the Marquis's mansion, who were wearing red armor. On top of the high wall, there were also the right-hand men of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, who were keeping an eye on the surroundings at all times. Especially, these personal guards were carrying crossbow bags and quiver on their backs. Looking at the shape of the crossbow bags, these personal guards were carrying 9 bolts of crossbow made by the Lu Kingdom, the most lethal crossbow. Each crossbow had 9 bolts, and it could shoot 9 pure steel bolts at the same time, and it could penetrate heavy armor within 200 steps. If 1,000 personal guards were all equipped with 9 crossbows, when 1,000 of them shot at the same time, it would be 9,000 pure steel bolts. With the current strength of Little Meng City's city guards, a single wave of bolts would be enough to destroy their formation. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan really came prepared, they didn't give Lu Qingfeng any chance to attack. Marquis Lu really has a powerful background. Wu Qi was lying on the roof of a building, staring at the crossbow bags on the backs of these personal guards with envy. The city guards of Little Meng City only had 1,000 crossbows, and all of them were single-string crossbows. Compared to the 9 bolts crossbow, the lethality and deterrence of these crossbows were like heaven and earth. Shaking his head, Wu Qi was like a gecko, climbing up a pillar and slipping into the courtyard. Using the shadows in the corners as cover, he sneaked into the deep end of the courtyard. From afar, he could already hear the wild laughter of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, and the crying of a girl coming from afar. Both of them had occupied the last courtyard of the general's office. Currently, the door and windows of the main room on the north side were wide open, and the room was brightly lit by candlelight. A teenage girl with messy clothes was weeping in the middle of the 2 men, and she was being raped by both of them at the same time. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were laughing happily, and they were scratching and biting the teenage girl's body crazily. Especially Lu Ziyuan, he was facing the teenage girl's face, and he was licking her face with his saliva, like a wild dog that had gone mad. Wu Qi was hiding in a thicket, quietly watching both men who were on the verge of losing their minds. The girl's clothes were made of rough linen, not the exquisite satin clothes worn by the 2 serving ladies. When the teenage girl was crying for her parents, her accent carried the accent of Little Meng City, which was totally different from the soft and mellow Lu Kingdom's official language used by the serving ladies. This should be the girl they had kidnapped from the common people after they arrived in Little Meng City. Wu Qi stared coldly at these 2 men who were crazily shaking their bodies, and in his mind, he had already decided their fate. No matter if it was the evil intentions they had towards Wu Qi, or the evil deeds they had done today, Wu Qi would send them to the 18th level of hell, so they could pay for their sins. Looking at these 2 men who were laughing and yelling crazily, Wu Qi quickly scanned the entire courtyard. In the west wing of the courtyard, he could vaguely feel the energy ripples. The doors and windows of the wing were all closed, and he could vaguely hear the teenage girl crying and begging for mercy. Gradually, the girl's breath became weaker, and her voice became softer and softer. However, the energy ripples were getting stronger, and eventually, it was like a sword that had just been pulled out of its sheath, shooting up into the sky. Along with the sizzling sound, the fallen leaves on the roof of the wing were pushed up 100 feet high by the energy, and were flying away like arrows. After that, a creaking sound could be heard, and the door of the wing was pushed open. An old man with a long beard and wearing a red robe walked out slowly. The old man coughed lightly, then he reached out his hand and a naked teenage girl flew out of the wing and landed heavily on the ground. The girl's lower body was a mess, and her skin was frighteningly pale. Her skin was also loose, as if all her blood essence had been sucked dry. "Guards, take this little bitch away." The old man snorted indifferently and said, "Next time, I'll pick those who are obedient and smart. This little bitch, how dare she bite me? Humph, where did you bring her from? Go, kill her family. How dare she bite me? Humph." A few blood-armored guards strode over, grabbed the girl's body and dragged her out of the courtyard. The old man twitched his mouth, looked to his left and right, and rubbed his crotch a few times. He gnashed his teeth and cursed, "How dare she bite me? She's courting death." Suddenly, the door of the east wing was pushed open, and an old man wearing a white long robe, embroidered with a large number of dancing flames with red lines, walked out slowly. The old man took a deep breath, stared at the old man in red robe, sneered, and said, "Old devil, it's fine that you've harmed someone else's daughter, but now you want to kill someone else's family? Aren't you afraid that you'll be struck by lightning in the future if you commit too many sins?" The old man in red robe, old devil, let out a strange laugh, tilted his head up and said, "Love between a man and a woman is the natural order of the world. But you, Lord Flame, you've taken the yang energy of young boys to replenish your own yang energy. Every year, you've killed nearly 100 young boys. Your sins are no less than mine." The two of them were like two fighting dogs, staring at each other fiercely. With an idea in his mind, Wu Qi sneaked into the back window of the east wing under the cover of the bushes. He pulled out the lower-tier magical dagger and cut off the window bolt. Like a stream of flowing water, Wu Qi quickly ran into the room. He gave Wu Qi a quick glance, grabbed a fiery red bag that was hanging diagonally on the bedside, spun and left. This bag was emitting a faint energy ripple. According to the records in Scroll of Stealing, this was the unique energy ripple of a storage-type magical treasure. Wu Qi focused his mind and took a look inside the bag. The storage space inside the bag was about the size of 3 ordinary rooms. It was a lower-tier magical treasure, but it was still very rare. Now, inside the bag, there was a small pile of dozens of red energy stones, a few talismans, and a long red sword. Besides that, there were a few sets of clothes and dozens of boxes of gold, silver, and jewelry. Other than that, there was nothing else. Wu Qi took Lord Flame's storage bag, then he sneaked into the west wing and took Old Devil's bag as well. Then, he left the courtyard at his fastest speed. He kept running and soon caught up with the guards who were dragging the dead bodies of the teenage girls out of the mayor's mansion. Pulling a piece of cloth to cover his face, Wu Qi followed the guards out of the mayor's mansion, heading toward the south of Little Meng City. Not long after that, 2 strong auras soared up into the sky, and one of them was a fireball. Lord Flame's angry roar echoed throughout the entire Little Meng City. "Who is this daring thief? How dare you steal the treasures of your ancestors? Your ancestors are going to burn you into ashes, inch by inch." Old Devil's sharp voice was heard as well, "All the savings that I've accumulated over 100 years, you bastard." Hearing the screams of the 2 old devils, Wu Qi just sneered and continued following behind the guards. Chapter 37. In the middle of the night, when the few personal guards of Lu Suifeng were about to break into a house, Wu Qi jumped up from behind them and broke their necks cleanly. The sound of bones breaking was so insignificant compared to the crazy roars of Old Devil and Lord Flame. Carefully, Wu Qi threw their bodies into a ditch on the side of the road. 2 figures flew over their heads, bringing with them a strong wind. A large group of personal guards of Lu Suifeng were riding on their mounts, following Old Devil and Lord Flame toward the city gate. Soon, the sound of hoofbeats could be heard, heading toward the only street that led to the outside world. Wu Qi nodded his head, tidied up the cloth covering his face, turned around and walked into the house. It was noon, and the sun was shining brightly. Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were sitting in a private room in Green Mountain Restaurant, looking at the empty street with a joyful expression on their faces. Last night, Wu Qi had stolen Old Devil's and Lord Flame's storage bags, and killed a few of Lu Suifeng's personal guards, throwing their bodies into the canal. With all these incidents combined, Lu Suifeng and his men had gone mad. Old Devil and Lord Flame were furious. They brought a large number of men and shut down all 4 city gates of Little Meng City, searching the entire city. They wanted to catch the thief who had stolen all their belongings, skin him alive, pull out his tendons, and cut him into pieces. Lu Suifeng was also furious about the death of his personal guards. With his power as the supervisory officer of the 3 armies, he ordered the city guards to enforce a curfew. No civilians were allowed to leave their homes, and every household was searched. All the shops were forced to close, and Little Meng City became lifeless, like an empty city. Drinking a cup of wine, Wu Qi squinted his eyes and said, "A wild dog whose tail has been burned, this should be the reaction of a dog." Lu Qingfeng was smiling proudly. He picked up a piece of tender deer meat and put it into his mouth, chewed it, and said slowly, "Marquis Lu and his men have crossed the line. The news of the extortion of those 100 or so merchants has probably spread to the royal capital by now. There are a few merchants here who have backgrounds that are not as simple as they think." Lu Qingfeng leaned leisurely against the window frame, watching the guards, who were clad in red armors and battle robes, rushing in and out of houses. He sneered and said, "Those fools who don't know the difference between life and death." Although Little Meng City was a remote city, didn't they know how many benefits Little Meng City had offered to those princes and dukes in King City every year? The rare items produced in Little Meng City every year, if we send them to the capital of Great Yan Dynasty, they will be worth at least tens of millions of gold coins. Wu Qi nodded knowingly and poured Lu Qingfeng a glass of wine without saying much. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan's reckless behavior had infringed on the interests of many people. Now, they had imposed a curfew on Little Meng City to hunt down the robbers, and all the business activities in Little Meng City had come to a halt. Let's see what kind of people can be mobilized to make things difficult for Lu Suifeng and Zhang Xian with the massive profits of tens of millions of gold every year. The evils brought upon themselves were the hardest to bear. Wu Qi raised his glass and clinked it with the smiling Lu Qingfeng. Both of them drank the wine in one gulp. Letting out a long breath, Lu Qingfeng stared at Wu Qi and asked, "Were you the one who took those 2 bags?" Both of them were embryonic breath-level cultivators of the Xiantian realm. They have a strong cultivation level and strong spiritual sense. "How did you get them?" Wu Qi stared at Lu Qingfeng with a smile on his face, shook his head and said seriously, "I didn't do it. I, Wu Qi, have strict rules in my sect. They never allow their disciples to steal things." Lu Qingfeng stared at Wu Qi silently, wishing he could slap the smile on his face. Rolling his eyes, Lu Qingfeng sneered and said, "I'm still a virgin, do you believe me?" Wu Qi stared into Lu Qingfeng's eyes with a serious expression and said, "I believe you." Lu Qingfeng's hands were trembling. He had met all kinds of people, but this was the first time he had met someone as shameless as Wu Qi. Grabbing the wine pot, he filled up his glass and drank 3 cups of wine in a row. Only then did Lu Qingfeng let out a long breath. Suddenly, a series of footsteps came from outside the private room. Xiaohe, who was standing outside, shouted, "Who dares to break in?" A few sounds of bodies colliding with each other were heard. Xiaohe staggered back into the private room, and a few right-hand men of Lu Suifeng walked in. One of them glanced at Lu Qingfeng arrogantly, put on a fake smile and said, "Acting Mayor, our Marquis has invited you to the General's office. From today onwards, our Marquis will be conducting a review on the military affairs of Little Meng City. Acting Mayor, you must be present." Wu Qi stood up slowly. He looked at Xiaohe, whose face had turned pale. Obviously, Xiaohei had suffered a great loss in the short fight just now. With a proud smile on his face, Wu Qi snorted and said, "I thought our marquis was busy catching thieves today and didn't have time to attend to his business." The faces of the few right-hand men of Lu Suifeng changed instantly. They stared at Wu Qi with hatred, and one of them sneered and said, "Under the management of both of you, the people of Little Meng City are living a peaceful life. Both of you have to give our marquis an explanation for what happened today." Lu Qingfeng patted his butt and stood up. With an attitude that was 100 times more arrogant than these right-hand men, he glanced at them and snorted disdainfully, "Explanation? What do you want me to say? Those who are on night duty are the personal guards of your marquis. The guards of the mayor's mansion were chased far away. What does this have to do with me?" Without even looking at these right-hand men whose faces had turned green with anger, Lu Qingfeng held his head high and walked out of the room. Wu Qi smiled at these men, patted Xiaohei's shoulder, and pulled him out of Green Mountain Restaurant. From afar, he could still hear the hysterical roars of Old Devil and Lord Flame. They were yelling for their men to dig 3 feet deep into the ground and search for the stolen goods. The theft of their storage bags was a huge blow to them. They had no choice but to search for the stolen goods with all their might. But Wu Qi knew very well that he had hidden the 2 storage bags in a secret place outside of the city. How could they find them if they searched the city? It could only be said that these 2 old devils had too much confidence in their judgment. When they found out their storage bags were stolen, they immediately brought their men and sealed off the only path leading to the outside of Little Meng City. They were sure that the thief was still in the city, that's why they made such a big fuss. But too bad, they never thought that the thief who had stolen their belongings was right next to them. They never thought that a thief who could steal their storage bags from under their noses was not someone that could be sealed off by just sealing off a path. A strong gust of wind swept across the sky. The old devil, who was wearing a red robe, jumped across the street with a grin on his face. He pointed at a carriage that was parked on the side of the street, as if he had gone mad, and roared, "My treasure must be in that carriage. Search! Search! You must find my treasure." Wu Qi shook his head and sneered disdainfully. Even if they continued to search for 10,000 years, they would never be able to find their storage bags. But when they entered the general's office, Wu Qi's good mood disappeared. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, together with a group of green-robed teachers, were taking out countless documents from the general's office and checking them word by word. These green-robed teachers were the experienced accountants brought by Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan. They had a deep understanding of all kinds of accounting methods. Dozens of account books were placed on a long table, and Lu Ziyuan was standing beside the table, flipping through the account books while sneering proudly. "Here, there are 300 sets of black iron full-body armors that can't be found. Here, there are 50 crossbows that can't be found. Here, it's even more interesting. Marching pills, disease avoidance pills, these 6 kinds of pills that are commonly used in the army, there are 15,000 of them that can't be found. Tisk tsk, 2 years ago, there were 3,000 silvers that weren't recorded in the accounting books for the construction of the new drill ground and barracks. How dare they? According to the report, when the barbarians attacked the city, they had lost 790 elite soldiers, and they had also received the pension for those 790 soldiers. But the soldiers' salaries are still being paid according to the number of soldiers, and at the same time, there is an extra sum of money for recruiting new soldiers. He continued reading dozens of records, and every single one of them was ridiculous and couldn't stand up to scrutiny. Even without these experienced accountants, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that there was a huge black hole in the military affairs of Little Meng City. When Lu Ziyuan heard Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng walking into the main hall of the general's office, he raised his head up and looked at Lu Qingfeng with an evil smile. "Elder brother, there's something wrong with your accounting books. The amount of embezzled military funds and false reports is a huge number." Wu Qi took a few steps forward, stared at Lu Ziyuan with a cold gaze and shouted, "Look carefully. These accounting books were made by that damn fatty, Yi Yan, when he was the mayor. Our account book was just made in the past few months. Lu Ziyuan twitched his mouth and let out a hollow laugh. That's hard to say. The former mayor is corrupt, but the current mayor isn't necessarily innocent. All these black holes, hee, elder brother, you'll have to bear some responsibility. Ah. Lu Ziyuan said with a frivolous tone, trying to push all the blame onto Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng just put his hands behind his back and sneered, but he didn't say anything. On the other side, Lu Suifeng was urging those accountants to quickly find out the new accounting books made by Wu Qi. He had to find some clues from these accounting books, and then he could use this information to get on Lu Qingfeng's good side and beat him to a pulp. Wu Qi also put his hands behind his back and stared at Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan coldly. He had made up his mind that he would make these two men stay in Little Meng City and accompany the barbarians. Time passed by, and soon, it was evening. Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were standing still in the main hall, but those accountants were sweating from the tiredness. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were impatiently urging them, asking these accountants to find more loopholes as soon as possible. Just when both of them were shouting and yelling, a series of hurried footsteps came from outside. A strong man wearing a black soft leather armor, with a long sword on his back, rushed in with large strides, holding a gold medal in his hand. His whole body was neat and tidy, without the slightest sign of loosening, and he carried a long sword on his back. Behind this man, dozens of Lu Suifeng's personal guards were following him closely, but none of them dared to stop him. I'm Yan Bugui, the scouting officer, working under the Great Yan Dynasty's Great General Jing Ku. According to the Great Yan Dynasty's military order, all warriors in Little Meng City who are 40 years old and above are to follow the army. Great Yan Dynasty, Great General Jing Ku. Suddenly, the corner of Wu Qi's eyes twitched violently. Chapter 38. Over 2,000 years ago, the founding emperor of Great Yan Dynasty, Ji Dan, also known as Yan Dan, led dozens of hangers-on and tens of thousands of people into the world. At that time, the current territory of Great Yan Dynasty was filled with countless barbarians, wild beasts roamed the land, and wild ghosts and demons appeared in broad daylight, fighting and slaughtering. Yan Dan lay dormant for 100 years, and when he rose to power, he drove the barbarians away, slaughtered the wild beasts, wiped out the wild ghosts and demons, and built Ji City in the wilderness, establishing the foundation of Great Yan Dynasty. For over 2,000 years, Great Yan Dynasty had prospered and flourished. Its territory covered a circumference of several tens of thousands of miles, and its people numbered in the hundreds of millions. Under Great Yan Dynasty, there were more than 100 vassal kingdoms built by the ministers of the imperial clan, and thousands of cities that had yet to be established. The total territory of Great Yan Dynasty stretched for several hundreds of thousands of miles. From the east to the west, from the south to the north, it would take Wu Qi 3 months to travel from one end of Great Yan Dynasty's territory to the other. Since the founding of the dynasty, Emperor Yan Dan had always been the emperor of Great Yan Dynasty. Jing Ku, who was given the title of Great General, was now one of the most influential figures in the military of Great Yan Dynasty, and also Yan Dan's most trusted confidant. Scouting Office was a special agency controlled by Jing Ku, just like the embroidered uniform guards and flying guillotine that Wu Qi was familiar with. The most important task of Scouting Office was to investigate the people's livelihood, monitor the market, and keep an eye on the emperors and nobles of various kingdoms. They also spent most of their time traveling deep into the wilderness, surveying the map, surveying the natural resources, spying on the barbarians, or doing some other secretive activities. Scouting Office had a very high authority in Great Yan Dynasty. Not only the Great Yan Dynasty itself, even the emperors of over 100 vassal kingdoms would have to lower their heads when they met with a member of Scouting Office. They had to treat them with courtesy, and do their best to carry out the orders given by a member of Scouting Office. Compared to a member of Scouting Office, the position of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan as the supervisory officer of 3 armies was just a joke. Lu Qingfeng stood beside Wu Qi and explained the origin of Scouting Office at the fastest speed. Wu Qi was dazzled by the story, and his heart was pounding violently. Was it a coincidence? Was it not a coincidence? Could it be? Could it be? Yan Dan, Jingku, and Ji City. All the blood in his body rushed to his heart, and Wu Qi's hands and feet felt cold. He looked at Lu Qingfeng with a smile and muttered in a low voice, "Then, what about Gao Jianli?" Lu Qingfeng lowered his voice and said carefully, "Gao Jianli. The Prime Minister, one of the 3 Prime Ministers and 9 Ministers of Great Yan Dynasty, is now in charge of the political affairs of Great Yan Dynasty." A tingling sensation like an electric shock rose from Wu Qi's tailbone all the way to his scalp. Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng with shining eyes. They've all lived for more than 2,000 years, right? He calculated in his heart. More than 2,000 years, wasn't it? From the end of the Warring States period until now, wasn't it more than 2,000 years? Lu Qingfeng smiled and whispered to Wu Qi, "They are all men with unfathomable cultivation base. 2,000 years of life is nothing to them." While both of them were whispering, Yan Bugui had asked Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan to examine the gold medal in his hand. It was real. Both of them were wearing a smiling face, bowing to Yan Bugui, swearing that they would do everything in their power to help Yan Bugui accomplish the mission. The Lu Kingdom was the least experienced kingdom among all the vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty, and its national strength could only be ranked below average. The monarch of the Lu Kingdom was only a viscount, the lowest rank in Great Yan Dynasty. As for an officer with a higher position in scouting office, his title might be the same as the monarch of the Lu Kingdom. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, were there really people who were trying to curry favor with them? Yan Bugui's expression was cold and indifferent, and he didn't pay any attention to their flattery. He glanced at everyone in the court and said with a cold voice, "Since I've proven my identity, all warriors in Little Meng City who are 40 years old and above, follow me now. Anyone who disobeys will be killed." Pausing for a while, Yan Bugui added, "This is an important mission, so we don't have the time to send any men from Ji City. If you can cooperate with us and complete the mission, I'll definitely reward you handsomely." Not only Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, even Lu Qingfeng's eyes lit up when he heard this. Since the men from scouting office said they would be rewarded handsomely, then they would be rewarded handsomely. The strength of the Lu Kingdom was much weaker than Great Yan Dynasty. Just a little bit of contribution from a scouting office was enough to make an ordinary citizen of the Lu Kingdom become a marquis. Once they could build a relationship with scouting office, they would be able to get even more benefits in the future. Immediately, Lu Qingfeng pulled Wu Qi and ran out of the mayor's mansion, starting to recruit men on the streets of Little Meng City. The name of scouting office was really useful. Lu Qingfeng only needed to stand at the end of the street and shout out a few words, and in an instant, nearly 100 men with cultivation above 40 years old and above volunteered to join them. The people of Little Meng City were tough and tough. Those who came here to make a living were either fugitives who had committed crimes, or barbarian hunters and rangers who lived with their lives on the line. These people had been struggling for their whole lives, but all they could get was a simple and happy life. Now, with the promise of scouting office, and with the promise of rewards, they were willing to join them. Soon, the news had spread across Little Meng City. Even the bodyguards of those caravans, as long as they had reached the required level, had come to the mayor's mansion and joined Lu Qingfeng's team. In just 15 minutes, all the warriors with cultivation above 40 years old and above in Little Meng City had joined Lu Qingfeng's team. There were more than 1,000 of them, and among them, there were more than 30 peak Hotian warriors. Wu Qi was shocked when he saw these men. He didn't expect there to be so many strong warriors in Little Meng City. Lu Suifeng had also quickly sent someone to summon Old Devil and Lord Flame. When these two old devils heard that someone from scouting office was asking for help, they immediately forgot about their belongings and rushed back with a smile on their face, afraid that they would miss this great opportunity. Both of them were embryonic breath cultivators of Xiantian level, and the rewards given by scouting office to cultivators were different from those given to ordinary warriors. If they could cooperate with Yan Bugui and complete this mission perfectly, what would be the loss of their wealth? Perhaps, they could even get more benefits. Among the right-hand men brought by Lu Suifeng and Lord Flame, there were 21 men with peak Hotian cultivation, and nearly 200 men with cultivation above 40 years old. In addition to that, Old Devil and Lord Flame, who had reached the embryonic breath stage of Xiantian level, were almost at the peak of Xiantian level. Their overall strength was really powerful. Yan Bugui was satisfied with the men that Lu Suifeng and Lu Qingfeng had gathered. After a brief calculation, he nodded his head and praised, "Over 1,000 men, that's more than enough. Open up the armory and equip everyone with leather armors. Also, get all the pills from the army. Quick, quick, quick." In less than 15 minutes, the whole army was brought out of Little Meng City, and they were riding their horses and heading toward the inner region of Meng Mountains. Everything happened too fast. Lu Qingfeng could only give some instructions to Lao He and Xiaohe, then he had no choice but to follow the army. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were also giving some instructions to their men with a mysterious look on their faces. After that, with a wicked smile on their faces, they left the city proudly. Wu Qi, together with Lu Qingfeng, Zhang Hu, and Hu Wei, were at the back of the group, discussing with the other 3 men in a low voice. After listening to Wu Qi's words, the other 3 men nodded their heads in agreement. Wu Qi analyzed the composition of this hastily assembled army. The personal guards of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were, of course, all of them were elites. Needless to say, Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng, Zhang Hu, and Hu Wei were also a tight group. As for those over 1,000 warriors who were temporarily recruited from Little Meng City, they were a mix of good and bad people. It was hard to tell who was hiding among them. The situation in the forest was complicated and extremely dangerous. Wu Qi told Lu Qingfeng and the other 2 to be careful at all times. They had to stay as far away from Yan Bugui as possible, and they had to keep a distance from everyone else. Especially after they found out the target of Yan Bugui and his men, they had to be extra careful and vigilant at all times. It was especially so for Lu Qingfeng. Although his cultivation base was not weak, and he was protected by a formation, he was, after all, from an influential clan. For him, the danger in this vast forest was at least 100 times greater than that of Wu Qi and the others. Zhang Hu, as a barbarian hunter, had spent most of his time in the forest, so he was more than capable of protecting himself. As an elite commander of the city guards, Hu Wei's familiarity with the forest was no less than Zhang Hu's, and he had the ability to protect himself. Wu Qi had inherited all of Wu Wang's experience and knowledge. For him, the forest was no different than his hometown. Only Lu Qingfeng had to be extra careful at all times. Perhaps, a blade of grass or a bug that he accidentally bumped into could cost his life. Lu Qingfeng nodded his head with a serious expression. Zhang Hu and Hu Wei exchanged a glance, then stood in front of Lu Qingfeng, one on the left and the other on the right. On the other hand, Wu Qi was riding at the front, but at the same time, he was at the back of the team, forming a small triangular defensive formation to protect Lu Qingfeng. Taking a deep breath nervously, Lu Qingfeng carefully took out 3 formation pillars from his storage bag. He painfully replaced the energy stones inlaid on the pillars, and replaced them with the few middle-grade energy stones that Wu Qi had shared with him during the past few days. Yan Bugui led the group and rode at full speed, following the main road that led to Meng Village. When they were about 10 miles away from Meng Village, Yan Bugui gave an order and jumped off his horse. Everyone followed him and got off their horses. Yan Bugui pouted his lips and let out a few insect chirps. A few black shadows silently emerged from the forest. A few strong men dressed like Yan Bugui quietly emerged from the forest. One of them asked in a low voice, "Boss, are these the only people?" Yan Bugui responded with a deep voice, then he turned around and shouted with a cold voice, "Once we enter the mountain, don't make any loud noises. Don't ask questions, don't talk, don't cough, don't fart, don't swallow your saliva. In short, treat yourself like a dead man and don't make any noise. Those who disobey will be killed." A strange silence enveloped the whole group. No one dared to ignore the threat from the scouting officers. Yen Bugue let out a cold snort and quickly gave out his order. He divided these 1,000 men into 5 groups, each led by himself and 4 other scouting officers. Quietly, they entered the forest. The guards led by Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were the most organized and elite group of men. Yen Bugue put them under his command. Even worse, he also put Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi, and a few other men under his command. In the whole group, besides Yen Bugue, the rest were the subordinates of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan. Wu Qi had an ugly expression on his face, but those 2 men were laughing complacently in their hearts. The night had enveloped Meng Mountains, and a faint dark fog was spreading in the forest. Wu Qi suddenly had a feeling that many people would die in Meng Mountains this time. Chapter 39. It was the 3rd day since they entered the forest. In high spirits, Wu Qi was standing on the branch of a huge tree that stood 1,000 feet tall, overlooking the endless dark green forest off in the distance. A faint water vapor was hovering around his body, isolating all the dust and tiny insects in the forest. The long robe he wore when he entered the forest was still clean and tidy. Under a huge tree covered with wisteria, Lu Suifeng's face was twitching as he stared at a dead guard whose body had turned black. Just now, when Lu Suifeng wanted to drink some water, this guard carried a water bag and went to a small stream about 1,000 feet away to get some water. A thumb-sized, colorful toad with a few fleshy spikes on its forehead attacked him brazenly. The toad jumped up and spat out a mouthful of black gas at the guard. The guard, who was at the peak of the Hotian realm, let out a miserable scream and fell to the ground. Before Lu Suifeng and the others could reach the guard and give him a secret antidote, the guard was already killed by the poisonous gas. The little colorful toad had jumped back into the stream, staring at Lu Suifeng with its big round eyes. However, it was smashed into pieces by Lu Suifeng's order. After 3 days in the forest, Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan's elite guards had lost more than 30 men, and all of them were killed because of some strange and unexpected reasons. Lu Suifeng's heart was bleeding. These guards were his father, Lord Puyang's personal bodyguards, and he had to lend them to deal with Lu Qingfeng this time. One of the guards next to Lu Ziyuan kicked a bush furiously and said, "This damn forest." Suddenly, a thin green snake darted out from the bush. The snake was as thick as a chopstick, but it was 5 feet long, and its deformed head was as big as a baby's fist. The snake slithered out silently, raised its head, and bit the guard's thigh. A miserable scream was heard. The guard only managed to jump 3 times before his face turned green, and bright green blood started to ooze out from his 7 apertures. When he fell to the ground, he was no longer breathing. The snake let out a horrible hissing sound and dashed straight toward Lu Ziyuan. A few guards hurriedly shouted and rushed forward, chopping at the snake with their swords and sabers. Green blood splattered everywhere as the green snake was chopped into more than 30 pieces. Just as the guards heaved a sigh of relief, the green snake's severed head suddenly jumped up and bit one of the guards on the leg. With a miserable howl, another one was lost. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were trembling uncontrollably. As descendants of aristocratic families, when had they ever seen such a ferocious creature? Sitting under a tree, Yen Bugue was munching on a wild fruit. He dug a small hole in the ground and buried the core of the fruit in it, carefully covering it with mud and moss. After that, he walked in front of Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan, and with an expressionless face, he warned them, "If your guards are still yelling before they die, I'll report to the great general and take away your future." Coldly glaring at them, Yen Bugue pointed at Lu Qingfeng, Zhang Hu, and Hu Wei, who were sitting under a tree and munching on wild fruits as well. With a cold voice, he said, "Learn from them. If you want to survive in the forest, you'd better put away all your aristocratic habits." The arrogant Lu Suifeng didn't even dare to look at Yen Bugue in the eyes. He lowered his head, bent his waist, and agreed to Yen Bugue's request with a smile on his face. In the next moment, all the guards had a wild pecan in their mouth that Yen Bugue had found. Yen Bugui purposely didn't peel off the skin and flesh of the pecan. The green flesh and thick juice soaked into the guards' mouths. Their tongues and oral cavity were numbed by the extremely sour juice. Now, even if he used a knife to chop them, they wouldn't be able to make any sound. Yen Bugui kicked one of the guards on his butt, and looked at the guard who opened his mouth but couldn't make any sound. Yen Bugui nodded his head and said, "You should have done this long ago. We are very close to the target now. Don't make any sound, or else, think about the consequences yourself." Lu Suifeng and his men looked for a flat ground in the woods and sat down dejectedly. They were like roosters that had lost a fight, and no longer had the arrogance they had before. Even Old Devil and Lord Flame, the two old monsters, had become extremely haggard. The terror of this forest was far beyond their imagination. Wu Qi watched the show for a while and smiled silently. He climbed up the trunk of the giant tree for a while. This giant tree had been around for a long time, and the wisteria on its body was so dense that it reached the ground. Wu Qi searched around the tree for a while, and as expected, he found a few bunches of dark wisteria fruits, which were green in color and emitted a light fragrance. Dark wisteria fruit was a fruit that could only be produced by wisteria trees that were over 100 years old. It had a certain effect of calming the nerves, nourishing the qi, and increasing one's inner energy. Its greatest use was to eliminate all kinds of miasma and insect poisons in the woods. If consumed in advance, one would be immune to all the common poisons in the woods for a day. Carrying 2 bunches of dark wisteria fruits, Wu Qi slipped down from the tree and walked towards Lu Qingfeng and his men. He gave each of them a few dark wisteria fruits. Lu Qingfeng had no idea what dark wisteria fruit was, and Hu Wei only had a vague impression of it. Zhang Hu's eyes brightened up, he gave a thumbs up and praised, "Good stuff. With this treasure, we will have a few more lives in the woods. But, even though it's not rare, it's not easy to find. Brother, how did you find it?" Wu Qi just smiled. The woods were full of moisture, especially the thick layer of moss on the trunks of these giant trees, which had accumulated a large amount of moisture. After practicing the water chapter, Wu Qi's senses in the woods were 2 to 3 times stronger than when he was outside. Although the fragrance of the dark wisteria fruits was very faint, he could still smell it from a few hundred feet away. After explaining the magical effects of the dark wisteria fruits to Lu Qingfeng was overjoyed. He quickly grabbed one of the fruits and stuffed it into his mouth. Yen Bugui, who was standing at the side, stared at the dark wisteria fruits in Wu Qi's hand in surprise. He strode over, squatted down and stared at the dark wisteria fruits for a long time, then exclaimed in surprise, "It really is dark wisteria fruits. How did you find them? These things will spoil after 7 days. Each of you will get 7 fruits, I'll take the rest." Wu Qi looked at Yen Bugui and said happily, "Master Yen, does offering these dark wisteria fruits count as a merit?" Yen Bugui was silent for a while. He turned around and looked at the people sitting on the ground. He said coldly, "If you can give each of them 7 dark wisteria fruits, I will give young Master Lu a great merit." Wu Qi's mouth twitched. He casually passed 2 bunches of dark wisteria fruits to Yen Bugui and said, "No more, no more. Is this a lump of soil? Do you think it can be found anywhere?" I don't want any merit, I'll just let them all die in the woods." Yen Bugui grabbed the dark wisteria fruits, fiercely glared at Wu Qi, then he turned around and walked over to Lu Suifeng and the others, handing over the fruits to them. 2 bunches of dark wisteria fruits only amounted to about 40 fruits. Wu Qi and the other 3 had gotten 7 fruits each, and there weren't many left. When Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan heard about the benefits of this treasure, they immediately shared the fruits with Old Devil and Lord Flame. How could those guards have a share? Those guards stared at the dark wisteria fruits with a complicated look in their eyes. Wu Qi looked at those guards' eyes and let out a complacent smile. He knew that Lu Suifeng and the others would never share this life-saving treasure with their subordinates. Don't worry about the scarcity of resources, but worry about the unevenness. Wu Qi murmured under his breath, repeating it over and over again. Lu Qingfeng laughed as well. He looked at Lu Ziyuan with a smile on his face, then cupped his fist and bowed to him from afar. Lu Ziyuan stared at Lu Qingfeng with a cold expression, as if he was looking at a dead man. Lu Qingfeng believed that if Yan Bugui wasn't here, Lu Ziyuan would have already ordered those guards to chop him into meat paste. This deep mountain forest was desolate, and it was the perfect place to kill someone. However, with Yan Bugui here, they didn't dare to do it. Even if they had 10 times the courage, they still wouldn't dare to do it. After resting for a while, the group continued to move deeper into the forest under Yan Bugui's lead. Gradually, they had reached the deepest part of Meng Mountain. Even when Zhang, who was a barbarian hunter, he didn't have the courage to come close to this place. Those who had dared to go deep into this place, none of them had ever returned. Perhaps, this group of scouting officers was the only exception. Wu Qi stared at Yan Bugui's back, who was leading the way. Yan Bugui's movements were very skillful, and he was very familiar with the path. Obviously, he had been to this place more than once. What were they looking for in this deep mountain forest? Vaguely, Wu Qi could sense the movements in the surroundings. Meanwhile, the other 4 teams were marching in the same direction, parallel to Wu Qi and his company. They were a few miles away from each other, and a few times, when they were resting, Wu Qi would stand on the cliff, and he could see the groups on the other side of the valley. After another half a month of trekking in the forest, Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan had lost another 30 guards. Now, they only had around 130 guards left. Both of their faces were extremely ugly. However, Wu Qi and his group didn't suffer any injuries. With Wu Qi and Zhang Hu, these 2 experts in surviving in the wild, their ability to survive was much stronger than Lu Suifeng and his group. When Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan started to have diarrhea for no reason, the group finally arrived at a big river in the forest. After passing through the dense forest, a bright light suddenly appeared in front of them. The river was a few miles wide. The river was very deep, and the water was flowing at a very fast speed. The river was flowing toward the east, but not a single sound of water could be heard. On the shoal of the river, big chunks of gold nuggets and golden sand were piled up. With a rough glance, there was at least 1 million gold here. Except for Yan Bugui, the rest of the group were attracted by this huge amount of gold. They couldn't help but take a deep breath. Standing by the river, Yan Bugui carefully observed the surrounding environment, then he lightly whistled a few times. The whistling sound was very soft, but it penetrated through the wind and clearly reached the other side of the river. On the other side of the river a few miles away, a few dark shadows flashed. It was unknown what they were moving, but suddenly, a meter-thick vine emerged from the bottom of the river, forming a vine bridge across the river. "Follow me. Be careful not to fall into the water, or you'll die for sure." Yan Bugui let out a cold humph, then took the lead and stepped onto the vine bridge, crossing the river quickly. Wu Qi pulled Lu Qingfeng and waited until Lu Suifeng and the others had crossed the river, then he carefully followed them across the vine bridge. The dark shadows on the other side of the river were 7 young men who were dressed like Yan Bugui. But now, their clothes were ragged, and their faces were haggard, looking no different from a barbarian. When they saw Yan Bugui, the 7 young men quickly bowed to him and made a few gestures that Wu Qi couldn't understand. Yan Bugui nodded his head and said in a low voice, 10 miles ahead, there is a small barbarian village. Don't let any of them escape. Lu Suifeng, who was feeling weak due to diarrhea, suddenly had his eyes lit up. Are there barbarian girls? Yan Bugui gazed at Lu Suifeng coldly, then he said in an indifferent tone, there are barbarian girls. I can give you 15 minutes. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan looked at each other, then they hurriedly brought their men and rushed forward. Wu Qi sneered, then he followed behind Yan Bugui together with Lu Qingfeng and the others. Chapter 40. In the twilight, Wu Qi was lying on top of a big tree, looking into the distance. About a mile away, in the middle of the forest, there was a small barbarian village. The village was surrounded by a fence made of thick wooden stakes, and behind the fence, there were nearly 100 wooden houses with thatched roofs neatly arranged inside the fence. Close to the fence, the front and back of the houses had been excavated and leveled, and some common herbs were planted there. A few old barbarians were sitting at the entrance of the village, leaning against the fence and chatting happily. Dozens of young barbarian men were washing a wild boar that weighed at least 1,000 kilograms by the stream at the end of the village. The blood of the wild boar had dyed half of the stream red. Inside the village, dozens of young barbarian girls with fair skin and picturesque facial features were cleaning the herbs on a piece of flat land. That piece of flat land was covered with wooden planks, and the herbs were neatly arranged on top of it by Chi-Chi. The herbs had been dried by the sunlight, and the girls were putting them into wooden boxes. Forget about those barbarian men, their bodies were covered with dense tattoos that would make anyone tremble in fear. However, this was the first time that Wu Qi had seen these barbarian girls. Their skin was fair and tender, and their faces were extremely beautiful. They were only wearing short animal skin dresses, revealing their arms and thighs. Their fair skin was reflecting a soft glow under the sunlight. Different from the men of the same tribe, these girls only had a small colorful flower pattern embroidered on their wrists and ankles. These flower and grass tattoos were not ugly at all. Instead, they gave these girls a strange charm out of nowhere. Wu Qi slid down from the big tree, made a gesture to Yen Bugue, and said, "There are many old men and women here, but not many young men." Yen Bugue cut down a vine and drank a few mouthfuls of water, then he said, "At this time, the young men should be out hunting. Let's kill all the people in the village first, and when those young men come back, we'll kill them all." Looking at the sky, "They should be back soon." Lu Suifeng let out an evil laugh. He rubbed his thighs and said with a low voice, "These barbarian women are all pretty good, I'm going to kill a few of them this time." Lu Ziyuan, Old Devil, and Lord Flame let out an obscene smile at the same time. Yen Bugue looked at them coldly and said indifferently, "I'll give you 15 minutes. You have a quarter of an hour to do it." Old Devil licked his lips with his thick and slippery red tongue. He said with a strange voice, 15 minutes is enough for me to pluck 3 girls. Lu Qingfeng raised his head and looked at the group of people who had lewd expressions on their faces. He shook his head slightly. He took out 3 array pillars and carefully laid out the grand white gold dagger array around a big tree. Zhang Hu and Hu Wei were also slightly tempted, but when they saw Lu Qingfeng's gloomy expression, they hurriedly and obediently took a few steps back, leaving Lu Suifeng and the others. Lu Ziyuan turned his head and glared at Lu Qingfeng. He scolded in a low voice, "What a hypocrite! Each barbarian woman is more interesting than the previous one. If I don't seize the opportunity to have a few more with me, I will be a hypocrite." On the other side, Yen Bugue was looking at Lu Qingfeng with admiration. He said slowly, "Young Master Lu, I didn't expect you to learn about formations. This is great. There might be a few powerful warriors in this barbarian village. We have to slaughter everyone in this village, and we can't leave anyone alive to inform us. If we run into some troublesome people, we will have to rely on young Master Lu's formation." Lu Qingfeng cupped his fist and bowed, then said in an indifferent tone, "Well said, well said." Wu Qi didn't say anything. He pulled out his long sword and squatted under the big tree in the middle of the formation. He looked like he was going to guard the formation and wouldn't leave no matter what. When Lu Suifeng and the others saw him doing this, they were very satisfied. They might be able to find some good stuff in this barbarian village. If Wu Qi and the others didn't do anything, all the good stuff would belong to them. Gradually, the night fell. The lights in the barbarian village were flickering. A few groups of young barbarians who had gone out to hunt returned to the village, laughing and joking. Yen Bugue stood on a high place and counted the number of young men who had returned. According to the number of wooden houses in the village, almost all of them had returned. Yen Bugue whispered a few nocturnal bird calls, then a few other young men from the scouting office picked up their long swords and disappeared into the woods. Pointing his finger forward, Lu Suifeng and the others, who couldn't wait any longer, rushed towards the barbarian village. 50 of Lu Suifeng's personal guards were guarding the back of the village. Old Devil was attacking from the left side of the village, while Lord Flame was attacking from the right side. Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan were leading the rest of the personal guards, shouting and rushing into the village from the front gate. 7 to 8 Peak Hotian realm personal guards attacked at the same time. Their long swords smashed onto the front gate of the village. With a loud bang, the 2-foot-thick wooden gate was violently smashed into pieces. Before the barbarians who were guarding the gate had the time to shout out a warning, Yan Bugui waved his hand and threw out a few throwing knives, stabbing deep into the throats of a few barbarians. The barbarians screamed and fell down from the wall. The village immediately burst into an uproar. Over 300 young and strong barbarians quickly picked up their weapons and rushed out of the houses. There was only a small path in the middle of the village. More than 300 young and strong barbarians were squeezing on the small path. They were pushing each other and pushing each other. It took them quite a while to figure out who had launched the surprise attack from where. Lu Suifeng gave the order. Dozens of personal guards took out their 9-bolt crossbows, aimed at the crowd of barbarians and pulled the trigger. The distance between them and the barbarians was less than 100 feet. The strength of the 9-bolt crossbows could easily penetrate heavy armors from 100 steps away. These barbarians were just ordinary humans, so there was no way they could withstand the continuous shooting of the crossbows. Countless miserable screams were heard, and at least half of the barbarians had their bodies penetrated by the crossbows and fell to the ground. Before coming here, Yan Bugui had asked these personal guards to dip the arrowheads in a deadly poison. Even if the arrows didn't hit the vital parts of these barbarians' bodies, as long as their skin was scratched, the poison on the arrowheads would kill them instantly. In the blink of an eye, half of the young and strong barbarians in the village had been killed. After that, even more severe attacks were launched. Old Devil let out a strange howl and rushed into the village. He waved his sleeves and threw out 12 thin bronze cymbals, which flew along the small path in the village. The bronze cymbals swept across the small path, and dozens of barbarians were hit by the bronze cymbals. Their bodies were cut in half at the waist. Lord Flame's body was covered with a layer of red flame, which was about a foot high. He laughed wildly and spread his arms, running through the barbarians. As long as the flame touched the barbarians' bodies, they would be burned into charred corpses in the blink of an eye. Yan Bugui suddenly shouted, "Be careful of the fire. Don't set the village on fire, or the other barbarian villages will find out about it. Along the way, we will slaughter all the barbarian villages." Hearing Yan Bugui's words, Lord Flame quickly retracted the flame on his body. He gathered the Zhen Qi in his palms and thrust his palms out like a butterfly. Those barbarians didn't even have the chance to see his figure clearly before they were slapped hard by his palms. The high temperature flowed into the barbarians' bodies through the force of Lord Flame's palms. Their skin suddenly turned red, and their blood began to boil. With the help of 2 embryonic breath-level Xiantian demons, all the barbarians in the village were killed in no time, leaving behind dozens of pretty girls. 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. Lu Suifeng couldn't hold back his desire any longer. He tore off his clothes and pounced on one of the barbarian girls like a wolf or a tiger. The girl let out a shrill scream, pulled out a jade dagger and stabbed it towards Lu Suifeng. Lu Suifeng slapped the girl across the face, sending her flying a few times in the air. When she landed on the ground, she was already unconscious. Old Devil, Lord Flame, Lu Ziyuan, and all the guards couldn't wait and rushed towards those girls who had a desperate look on their faces. Soon, the village was filled with ear-piercing screams and miserable moans. Low and deep noises of insects could be heard from all around the village. Among all the people present, only Yan Bugui could understand the meaning of these noises. 15 barbarians tried to escape from the village during the chaos, but they were ambushed and killed by the scouting officers who were stationed outside. In the dark of the forest, these elite scouting officers were as good as dead. All of a sudden, a girl let out a blood-curdling scream. Old Devil was pressing on top of the girl. His muscles were wriggling in a weird way, and the girl's body was trembling violently. Soon, her body turned deathly pale, without any trace of blood. The young girl stared at the sky with her eyes wide open. Her eyes were deathly pale, and her pupils had shrunk to the size of a needle tip. Another one. Ha ha ha, these barbarian girls have more blood and chi. Old Devil threw away the girl who had died a horrible death, kicked one of the guards who was struggling crazily beside him away, and pressed himself on the girl impatiently. In the dense forest outside of the village, Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were standing side by side on a branch of a tree. With the dim light from the village, they were quietly watching what was happening. Very beastly, isn't it? Lu Qingfeng asked in a low voice. Yes, it is. If there's a chance, I'll kill Old Devil. Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng with a serious expression and said, he better not give me the chance, or else I'll definitely kill him. Hu Wei, who was standing under the tree, suddenly raised his head up and said with a low voice, when the barbarians attacked Little Meng City, they did the same thing. Wu Qi raised his head up and stared at the sky. With both of his hands hidden in his sleeves, he said with an indifferent tone, but, we're not barbarians. It's fine when two tribes fight and kill each other. I don't mind if they occasionally humiliate a few girls. But, if he forcefully plucked the girl, she would have died a horrible death. Lu Qingfeng raised his head up as well. He stared at a twinkling star in the sky and said with a low voice, Old Devil. If my cultivation is strong enough, I'll help you kill him. Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng looked at each other and smiled. Just when they were about to say something, a loud roar suddenly came from afar, which made their bodies tremble. Outside the protective wall of the village entrance, a 2-meter-tall barbarian man with a pitch-black body was slowly walking back. He was as strong as a small mountain, and he was carrying a wild boar that weighed more than 2,000 pounds on his shoulder. When he stood at the entrance of the village and saw what was happening on the flat land in the middle of the village, which was usually used to dry herbs, he let out a loud roar. The wild boar on the barbarian man's shoulder was thrown a few dozen steps away by him. While roaring crazily, a 4-meter-tall, red shadow of a ferocious tiger emerged behind him. Lu Qingfeng's body suddenly trembled. He cried out in surprise, a beast warrior. How can there be a beast warrior in this small village? Wu Qi stared at the barbarian man who had a ferocious tiger's shadow behind him in surprise. He asked, what is a beast warrior? The barbarian beast warrior let out a loud roar and suddenly leaped forward like a ferocious tiger leaping down from the mountain. With just a single leap, he had leaped a few hundred feet away and threw out a punch onto the back of a guard who was playing with a girl. A crisp sound was heard, as if someone had stepped on a honey peach. The guard's body, along with the armor on his upper body, were shattered into pieces. Chapter 41. The barbarian beast warrior's movement was very fast. After killing a guard with a single punch, he immediately threw 2 punches at Old Devil and Lord Flame. The 2 old monsters were still indulging in the young barbarian girl's strong, smooth, and tender body. When the guard was killed, the blood and flesh splattered on their bodies woke them up from their stupor. In the end, the heavy fists of the beast warrior came smashing at them like 2 battering rams. Lord Flame let out a cry of surprise. His reaction speed was slightly faster. He quickly stood up and used both of his hands to block the incoming punch. In such a short time, he didn't have enough time to gather his strength. The barbarian beast warrior's punch landed on both of his palms. Lord Flame let out a miserable howl and was sent flying more than 100 feet away by the tremendous force. His head smashed onto a rock. My hands! Both of Lord Flame's palms were deformed like chicken claws that had been run over by a road roller. The skin on his palms had exploded, and blood sprayed everywhere. Underneath the blood, one could even see the pale white bones. While he was screaming in pain with both of his hands, Old Devil was suffering even more. Whether it was Lord Flame or Old Devil, both of them had cultivated to the level of embryonic breath of Xiantian level by using some evil techniques and external forces. Their innate chi was mixed, and their foundation was not very stable. Their strength was much weaker than a real embryonic breath of Xiantian level warrior. Their bodies had not been tempered to the level of embryonic breath of Xiantian level, and the speed of their innate chi circulation was not any better than a meridian cultivating level warrior. Old Devil could only feel a gust of evil wind coming from his back. How could he, who was in the middle of forcefully absorbing the girl's energy, have the time to stop? All he could do was to leave the girl's body, gather a little bit of innate chi and infuse it into his back. With a muffled sound, Old Devil was sent flying 20 feet away by the punch. The violent force of the punch was like a bomb that exploded on his back. His skin and flesh were smashed into pieces, and at least 3 parts of his spine were broken. Even though he was an embryonic breath of Xiantian level warrior, with his spine broken, he was destined to become a cripple. Old Devil let out a miserable howl and fell to the ground. Both of his hands were frantically scratching the ground, but his spine was broken, and he couldn't feel his thoracic vertebrae. Even though he had used all his strength, he still couldn't get up from the ground. The old monster who had harmed countless people finally screamed in fear, "Save me, old Lihua, save me! Marquis, save me, save me!" Lord Flame's palm was seriously injured, and he was busy applying ointment on it. After hearing Old Devil's scream, how could he have the time to care about him? Lu Suifeng dared not to let a embryonic breath Tier Xiantian warrior of his family die just like that. He hastily tried to call the guards to save Old Devil, but that barbarian beast warrior had already locked his eyes on Lu Suifeng, who was wearing a golden crown and a luxurious robe. "Father! Mother! Sis!" That beast warrior raised his head and let out a long roar. With a single punch, he forced back 8 of Lu Suifeng's most powerful right-hand men, then he charged towards Lu Suifeng with bloodshot eyes. He dodged 2 long swords that were slashing towards his body, then reached out both of his hands and grabbed the heads of 2 of Lu Suifeng's guards. He crushed their heads into pieces, then kicked towards Lu Suifeng. Lu Suifeng screamed and retreated. But no matter how fast he retreated, he couldn't move as fast as that beast warrior. The main part of Lu Suifeng's body quickly retreated, and managed to keep a safe distance from that beast warrior. However, a part of his body that had swelled up was still standing. The beast warrior's kick landed on that part of his body, turning half of Lu Suifeng's body into a puddle of blood. "My mother!" Lu Suifeng let out a miserable howl. His face turned green, and he jumped up and down while holding his lower body. The barbarian beast warrior let out a furious roar, "I'll fuck your mother." His body turned into a black tornado, roaring as he dashed towards Lu Suifeng again. The guards brought by Lu Suifeng and Lu Ziyuan desperately surrounded this barbarian beast warrior. However, this beast warrior was really like a ferocious tiger in human form. He had great strength and incredible speed. Even 2 embryonic breath realm old monsters were injured by his sneak attack. How could these guards form an effective siege in such a short time? Especially when this beast warrior's roar was like the roar of dozens of ferocious tigers at the same time. The deafening roar shook the ears of these guards and made them see stars flashing in front of their eyes. They couldn't even keep their balance, so there was no way they could effectively attack the enemy. Finally, something even more frightening happened. When the dozens of Peak Hotian right-hand men attacked the beast warrior at the same time, the ferocious tiger's shadow behind the beast warrior suddenly froze and let out a soundless roar towards the sky. Within a radius of 1,000 feet, all the trees and flowers swayed without any wind blowing. The thatch on the roofs of the village suddenly flew in all directions. The dozens of Peak Hotian right-hand men dropped their weapons and stared at the ferocious tiger's shadow in fear. They held their ears with both of their hands, and blood was dripping down from their earlobes. The long roar of the ferocious tiger's shadow directly resounded in the minds of these right-hand men, nearly shredding their souls into pieces. Seeing that no one could stop this beast warrior, Yen Bugue, who was standing aside, finally made his move. "Why are you guys just standing there like idiots? Go to the outer circle and shoot at him with heavy crossbows." Yen Bugue let out a loud roar and ordered those panicking guards to retreat. He drew out the long sword from his back and suddenly widened his eyes. A long and drawn-out wolf howl rang out, and a huge green wolf phantom that was about 4 meters tall also surged out from behind him. Yen Bugue's running speed was raised to an unbelievable level. He swung his sword and thrust it toward the beast warrior, leaving a cold gleam in the air. Lu Qingfeng cried out in surprise, "So, Yen Bugue is also a beast warrior." The barbarian beast warrior let out a shrill cry and shouted, "Dad! Mom! Sister! All of you are going to die." Swinging both of his arms, the barbarian beast warrior threw dozens of punches and kicks at Yen Bugue like a violent storm. The ground shook violently. The barbarian beast warrior leaped up and down with the help of the ground. Every time he landed on the ground would tremble violently, and the pebbles on the ground would fly up a few feet into the air. Yen Bugue stooped down and waved his sword. After the first sword beam appeared, more and more sword beams were launched, one after another. They were like thunderbolts roaring in the dark clouds, piercing the vital parts of the barbarian beast warrior's body with a sharp wind-breaking sound. The barbarian beast warrior was extremely strong and fast. Although Yen Bugue's strength was not as strong as the barbarian beast warrior's, his speed was much faster. Both of them were like 2 wild gusts of wind, and in just a blink of an eye, they had destroyed half of the village. Wherever the barbarian beast warrior's fist landed, a wooden house would explode into pieces. Wherever Yen Bugue's sword beams swept across, the wooden houses and even the herbs in the herb fields nearby would be cut into pieces. All of a sudden, a few guards of Lu Suifeng let out a loud cry. Yen Bugue hurriedly retreated upon hearing the cry. The few guards raised their 9-bolt crossbows and shot at the barbarian beast warrior. Bang! 36 pure steel bolts were shot out from a distance less than 20 steps away from the barbarian beast warrior. Although the barbarian beast warrior had a very fast reaction speed, he still could not avoid being shot from such a close distance. 18 bolts pierced into the barbarian beast warrior's body, pierced through his strong body, and nailed him on the fence wall of the village. The poison on the arrowheads quickly took effect. The barbarian beast warrior's body trembled a few times, and his dark skin was soon covered with a layer of green. You killed all my people." The barbarian beast warrior stood still, trembling all over, and roared, I curse you in the name of the mountain spirit. You will all die in this forest, your souls will be devoured by the mountain spirit, and you will sink into the darkness forever." Yen Bugue sheathed his sword, stared at the barbarian beast warrior, sneered, and said, "There is no such thing as the spirit of heaven and earth. The things you barbarians believe in are all fake." The barbarian beast warrior roared furiously, and was about to punch Yen Bugue with his fist. However, the poison quickly spread through his body, and even his heart was contaminated by the poison. Just as he raised his fist, his body stiffened and fell to the ground. The shadow of a ferocious tiger suddenly condensed behind the barbarian beast warrior. It stared at Yen Bugue, raised its head and let out a soundless roar. A circle of bright light surrounded the shadow, and many tiny dots of light flew out from the barbarian beast warrior's body, gradually merging with the shadow of the tiger. Yen Bugue sneered and said, "That won't do. You were killed by someone. If your soul is merged with the soul of the barbarian beast, and your soul doesn't enter the cycle of reincarnation, perhaps you will become a soul demon in a few decades. That will be our problem." Yen Bugue quickly walked to the front of the barbarian beast warrior, pressed his hand on the forehead of the shadow of the tiger, and began chanting in a low voice. "The spirit of all living things, the same root and the same origin. Brave soul of the forest, this is not the place for you to stay. In the name of the mother of all living things, go away." A green light shot out from Yen Bugue's palm, merging with the shadow of the tiger. The shadow of the tiger shattered abruptly, and it was as if countless fireflies had suddenly appeared in the village. Specks of crimson light were swaying in the night breeze, and very soon, they drifted towards the direction where Wu Qi and his company were. Yen Bugue breathed out a sigh of relief and said, "All right, this is the end." Those red dots of light were carried by the wind into the jungle. After drifting for a few thousand feet, they had become dim and lifeless, and could no longer be seen with naked eyes. Wu Qi spread the water vapor around, but he could still clearly sense their existence. It was a very pure soul force that had lost all its memories. It had been broken into the most basic soul particles by Yen Bugui using a secret technique. Instinctively, Wu Qi recalled the situation when he was in the great universal dimensional portal. He took a deep breath, and silently exercised the hand of web. The water vapor filled the air, and more than 80% of the soul particles were quickly gathering towards Wu Qi. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, the huge waves suddenly started spinning rapidly, and all the soul particles were sucked into his body by the whirlpool in his spiritual ocean. In just a few breaths' time, the strength of Wu Qi's soul had increased by 4 times. Even if he closed his eyes, he could still sense everything within a radius of 100 feet around him. The wind was blowing, the leaves were swaying, and there were even a few bugs hiding in the soil under the tree. Everything was so clear, as if it was right in front of his eyes. The innate energy in his body began to compress inwardly, and a few important acupuncture points on the conception and governor vessels were opened up by the mutated innate energy. A hazy water vapor that could be seen with naked eyes was slowly gathering towards Wu Qi's body. Lu Qingfeng stared at Wu Qi with his mouth wide open. His face was twitching, as if he had seen a ghost. Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng and smiled. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, "I was inspired by the fight between 2 beast warriors. Wu Qi has broken through to the respiration level of the Xiantian realm." Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, who were under the tree, bumped into the tree almost at the same time. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.